Good morning and welcome to today's special meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we can begin, can I remind everyone to only turn on the microphones when you wish or invited to speak, and make sure you turn them off afterwards. I've received apologies from Mr. O'Shea and Mrs. Page is kindly subbing for him. Item 1, question time. I've not received any questions from the public. Item 2, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7. I've not received any questions. Item 3, there are no urgent items. Declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. I assume all of those that are district and borough councillors will declare another registrable interest in item 7 regarding LGR. I also need to declare under item 9 Bay Manor Hall, as that sits in my division. Are there any other declarations? Okay, thank you. On to item 5, declarations of the party whip in accordance with overview scrutiny procedure rule 16. Does anyone have any declarations of the party whip? Thank you. And item 6, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 36. I've not received any petitions. So I'm just going to request a change to the order of business. So I propose to change the order of the business as set out on the agenda so that the MTFS monitoring report, which is item 10, after we've considered the LGR business case, as the leader is attending for both those items. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. I just need to remind me. Okay, on to item 7, the local government reorganisation draft business case. So members will have received a supplementary report and a copy of the draft business case, which was circulated and published on the council website last week. To present the report, we're joined by John Sinnott, the Chief Executive, Declan Keegan, the Director of Corporate Resources, and Rosemary Whitelaw, the Head of Democratic Services. Also present are all the Chief Officers to answer any questions relevant to their departments. We're also joined by the leader, Mr. Harrison, the deputy leader, Mr. Crook, and the lead member for resources, Mr. Fowler. Is he? Oh, Mr. Fowler's not here. Okay, thank you. And finally, I've invited members of the political groups not represented on the commission to the meeting so that they can contribute to the discussion. Mr. Mear, Mrs. Bottomley, and Mr. Charlesworth. He's not here either. So we've just got Mr. Mear and Mrs. Bottomley here. So welcome to everyone. So, Mr. Harrison, as leader, do you have any initial comments before I call on officers to present the report?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for their hard work in getting the business case ready in a very short timescale. It is testament to their professionalism that they have achieved this. The business case presents our preferred option, creating a single unitary council for Leicestershire and Rutland. We have considered feedback from the residents, and this proposal avoids splitting communities or changing city boundaries, which could affect our local heritage. We plan to use an area committee and keep parish and town councils involved so local identity and representations are maintained. Our approach also aims to involve communities in shaping local services through the local area committees and our planning committees. The new Unitary Authority Council for Leicestershire and Rutland will ensure that local people are involved in the decisions that affect them on their local areas. Combining services across the county, district and Rutland will reduce duplication, improve the coordination and provide consistent, high-quality services. This model avoids the problems that come with working teams, especially in critical areas like children, social care, and help smaller communities like Rutland remain resilient. Financially, this proposal is strong, independent analysis, estimated annual savings of about 40 million a year, mainly from management and back office efficiencies. These savings can be put back into the frontline services to help protect them in the long term. Our approach is expected to deliver savings more quickly and less risk than other options. We have consulted with residents and businesses, voluntary groups, parish and town councils and staff Nearly half the survey responses support single unitary authority, while over two-thirds were against expanding city boundaries. Three-quarters were against any change at all. In regard to the city boundary extension, as discussed at the last meeting, the Commission, my view and my views of my group is that we need to recognise the county councils, even though we do not agree with them. It's not enough, however, just to say we do not agree with them. So our business case sets out an analysis of the different options, in particular, what impact the city boundaries extension would have surrounding the county. We believe this option meets all the criteria set by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. It's based on strong evidence, provides real financial benefits, protects our heritage. It's the only option that keeps the boundaries of the historic counties of Leicestershire and Rutland intact. Or expanding to boundaries, so offer the same benefits and carry more risks such as financial, unviable councils and fewer savings. I hope the members of the Commission will be supportive of this proposal, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. I think, Declan, you're going to take us through it to start with.
I was just going to reiterate the point you made. It's a draft business case. So if the Commission does have any sort of comments that sort of strengthen the case, there's plenty of time to incorporate those. And just highlight, there was a couple of documents circulated with the genders correctness, some inaccuracies in the district case. It was mainly to, I suppose, stop any kind of confusion at this meeting. When government does its formal consultation out in sort of the new year, we will have a chance then as a council to write and correct any sort of inaccuracies on the record, as it were, at that point. But because members have seen the case, wasn't going to sort of take it through. It's obviously based around the presentation that you saw last week rather. Sorry.
Just to clarify, those inaccuracies that is that taken from the district's business case? Is that what that document is?
Yes, there are two particular paragraphs which critical of the County Council, paragraphs 110 and 111. And in my experience, it's unusual to see anything like that in a business case. I think it's only fair that the County Council responds. What the districts have said to me is at best misleading. And I think if not in the full business case, then when we make the submission to government, we should correct the record.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, any questions? No, we had a long session last week. Dr. Bloxham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a whole list of stuff. Just clarifying, perhaps for everyone as well, that small inaccuracies and typos and things, not worth going over those now. Who should we email those to?
Could you send them to me, please?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So that will hopefully save us a lot of time here today. Yeah, a couple of things just about the options that we're including in there. We have a lot of options already, and then we're going to add in the Blaby, Harbour and Oadby option. Obviously, we need to do that because that's one of the city's two options now. I just wonder if it's worth taking out a couple of the options that are no longer on the table, because at the minute it looks like we're covering too much. So it would just focus on the two city options, the district option, our option with and without Rutland, and possibly the option with Oadby and Wigston as our sort of least bad expansion option, but take out the PUA and the Blaby and Oadby option, maybe. That's just a thought. Couple of bits, the table on pages 46 and 47, the one where we've sort of got the traffic light colours. I get that we've got to make our plan look as strong as possible, but I do think perhaps we're going a little bit too far in some of the criticisms of the district plan, particularly the last couple of points on democratic governance and neighbourhood empowerment. I mean, they seem to be sort of the strengths of their plan, if anything, rather than, you know, I think they're purple coloured or something. So, you know, perhaps they're not as good as ours, but perhaps they shouldn't be quite as negative. And I think we'd still win on the, you know, the point summary at the bottom if we altered those. Couple of strengths. I think I like the bit on the 5th paragraph on page 29. And just so I'm using the page numbers from the document we've got, not the page numbers on the business case, which are about 7 pages out. But we talk briefly about how doing border changes at the same time would create a lot of problems and possibly delay it. And I think that's worth emphasising a little bit more strongly in the business case to make it, you know, to get that point across. I think the government would potentially like that point, so perhaps just play that up a little bit more. And then finally, just I've got a few other smaller ones, but maybe I'll just send those to Rosemary as well. But just the overall look of the thing. I know it's a draft, but you know, in comparison with the district case, ours is not that visually appealing. So I'm presuming we're going to get lots of pictures of Bradgate Park and Kirby Muxloe Castle. Maybe don't get the exact pictures they've got, but you know, just make it look a bit better. Thanks.
Do you want to come back on those?
Pick some of those up. Absolutely on the pictures point, so it reflects the draft. We weren't going to go probably quite as far as the districts one. That they obviously have sort of gone quite heavy on the design side, but absolutely take your point. You should sort of feel more about the sort of the place. So we'll incorporate those. In terms of going back to your first one, the options take out some. We'll have a look at that. And it's unfortunate, but it has kind of grown a little bit as kind of like the last few weeks have progressed. But I think the tables you pull out or you pointed out on sort of page 40 odd, it does exemplify your point that that's starting to get quite sort of crunched up on the page. So we'll have a look at that and see whether we can maybe do a little bit of long listing at the first to say we've looked at these, but actually the ones that we're focusing as a smaller number. But we'll have a look at that. But like I say, it has grown a little bit as time's gone on, and we can have a look at the sort of the options and how we've done the scoring as you've picked out. Again, interested if other members have got a sort of similar view, but obviously some of these are kind of quite subjective as opposed to analytical. So it can be a little bit kind of a difference between a point maybe not always matters. So we'll have a look at that, particularly if there's any other comments from members. And yeah, it's useful getting feedback on the bits worth strengthening as well. So we'll take that into account as well if that's something that people feel it resonates with them as a strength of the case.
Just picking up on that point, obviously the city have now come out and said their base model, I think they're calling it, is looking at Oby Wigston, Blaby Harbour into their plan. Are we now doing the financial modelling of that, and when is that likely to be done? And is it likely to be similar to the other city expansion sort of outcomes?
Yes, we are we have included that as part of the modelling. We're just doing some final reviews of that, but it looks like it produces similar overall savings to the other city expansion options. The reason being that the model works on making assumptions about savings across existing spend. So even with that larger city expansion option, it's still generating a similar amount of savings because it's looking at the county and city's existing spend. I think it will produce a slightly lower saving because the disaggregation costs, I think, would be higher because you've got more moving into the city. But I think it's going to be in a similar ballpark. I wouldn't expect it to be too different from the other city expansion options.
And just again on that business case where they've put the base model and then they've underlined a bit that says this is not the option we want to revert back to the non-compliant one. I mean, for me, that's very, very muddled. And I'm not sure what they're wanting to do. If we had any more clarity about what that means about putting a model in that's not what they want, do we have any view on how that's going to sit?
We don't have any further clarity. Our understanding is the city have put forward that option because they've been advised by MHCLG and independently have taken their own advice that they need to adhere to the government guidelines originally, that if you want to extend your boundaries, you have to include districts as whole building blocks. Having said that, there is MHCL guidance which we've seen, which confirms that, but also says in these words, basically, if you think there's a better option to make you more sustainable in the longer term, put that in as well. So that's the difference, I think, between their submission in March, their preferred option still, and their submission now with these three whole districts. How they actually deal with that in their final submission remains to be seen, but I suspect whatever happens next year when the government respond, the city will be very clear that they don't necessarily want to take in all of the three districts in this particular submission now. They want, frankly, part of Charnwood.
Thank you. Okay. Any other members from the ME?
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate what Mr. Harrison said, that obviously last time there was a little bit of criticism on the lack of details. So a huge amount of work has obviously gone into this in a very short timescale. So thank you. I was slightly concerned. The report I felt read as though it was Leicestershire County Council remaining as is, and it will take on extra responsibilities rather than a new unitary authority being set up that would be distinct and different from Leicestershire county council as it currently stands. And I think it would be quite hard to explain to residents moving forward how it would be different as this is currently written. One of the other things I had some questions on was that there's quite a lot of reference to things like secures a viable future, freeing up money to reinvest in public services. But is that necessarily an accurate way to describe this if we're still not even going to save enough to plug the black hole we currently have? We're not really freeing up money to be reinvested. We are using it to plug a black hole we are currently working with. Page 88 refers to staff reductions as a source of savings, which makes sense, but there still wasn't a huge amount of clarity on how many staff we're anticipating would be lost as part of that staff reductions. So I was just wondering if we could get some clarity on that. There was also reference to, I think it's page 22, said local services that are often not a statutory requirement can be protected, enhanced and put onto a sustainable footing. But I'm not really sure how we can be putting that in a proposal, because if it's not a statutory requirement, wouldn't that be down to the political direction of the new administration? And I think there were quite a few assumptions that actually would be down to the political direction of a new administration, and we couldn't necessarily be providing assurances that that is the way that it would go. So, for example, we talk about, ensuring that some community groups or town and parish councils take on an enhanced role, but that they can opt out. It didn't really specify what the enhanced role would entail. And there was a lot about, building community groups and ensuring collaboration, but that is going to be down to who runs the administration. The only final comment I had, on a positive note, as I was really pleased to see the inclusion of community grants that are often offered by both county and districts and boroughs. Is there any more detail on how these will be prioritised and safeguarded within this proposal, considering like the financial systems we'll be working in? Thank you.
I can pick up the sustainability one. Are you okay, Rosemary, to pick up the community type ones? So in terms of the sustainability one, the reason I use the phrase free up, because you genuinely are freeing up. You're taking money that's kind of trapped, as it were, in overheads that is essential for sort of the running of the organisation, but this unlocks a way of moving that money towards services that wouldn't otherwise. So if you, I don't know, the current position of percentage overheads to services, actually, when you've got the sort of the new unitaries, that overhead percentage will reduce and the service percent will increase. So there is a genuine freeing up and moving towards services. Now, you're right, and we make the point in this business case, this isn't the silver bullet that kind of resolves all our financial problems. It's making the point, actually, we still need to keep doing quite a few other things. But at the end of the day, if you go with the reorganisation case, you will have more service provision than if you just sort of stay as we are in sort of this sort of two-tier arrangement. So it's kind of, it can be difficult to kind of get the language that you want it as simple as possible so the reader kind of absorb it. So it's not trying to mislead, because there is a genuine move away from, like I say, from overheads to service delivery. The reason we haven't put, I suppose, again, it's that clunkiness of language, because you're right, a lot of any policy decisions is going to be a sort of a decision for the new authority. And if we litter it in every point in the case, it becomes kind of quite clunky. But we will, as we do the review, make sure we're kind of clearer on the kind of maybe it's could instead of will and things like that. So I do take your point. We don't want to overplay what we're doing, because this should be about reorganisation as opposed to taking policy decisions away from that new administration.
And I suppose to emphasise that point on the community things, it will be something that's down to the new administration, and that's why we've tried not to be too prescriptive at this stage. But certainly it's something that over the next couple of years, while we're getting ready for local government reorganisation, we're keen to work with parish and town councils and community groups to come up with a menu of options of services that could be devolved. Michael? You next, James? Michael, you go.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. I mean, obviously, I could start from a position within the Liberal Democrat group of disagreeing with the central argument in this paper, and I think it does put too positive a glow on the one authority for Leicestershire and is too negative about the alternatives. A few questions. I mean, one of the big concerns we have is that obviously the creation of one authority for Leicestershire means creating a very large authority with 750,000 people. Your argument is that this can be dealt with through the area committees, so I'm not sure how much power and responsibility they're going to end up with. I mean, when it comes down to, say, planning decisions, how do you envisage those being taken by the new authority? Will the planning committee that makes the decisions be made up of members from across the county, or will there be a borough decision making at that level? Because I think there is a concern that some boroughs may end up with having high numbers of housing in the wrong places imposed on them by a county-wide decision making. The survey sample, I mean, it says that the figures in favour was just under half for the one Leicestershire option. It's a low sample. I mean, 1,000 out of 750,000 people. So you're looking at just over 0.1%. And certainly from the people I've spoken to, the general mood has been very negative about the idea of one authority for Leicestershire. Also, I know that one of the arguments that's often put is that, well, you can have one authority that will carry on with the same systems for, say, social care and so on. But obviously, at the moment, we have many different ways of delivering some services at borough and district level. For example, if you take housing, the housing stock in Hinckley and Bosworth has been maintained by the borough council, whereas in other boroughs and districts, they've obviously not maintained their housing stock. So there is an argument the other way round of saying that one authority for Leicestershire could mean a change to the way in which a number of services are currently delivered and organised. So if I just put those forward, thank you.
I'll take the planning decisions one, because I don't think I've put anything particularly specific in the business case, but I can amend that. The plan is that you would have a central planning committee that would take those really big strategic decisions, a new town, a massive logistics development that's going to affect the whole of Leicestershire and Rutland. You'd have a central committee to take those decisions. You would then, for those smaller decisions, a small new housing estate on the edge of a village, those sorts of things, you would have area planning committees, not necessarily 7 or 8, perhaps 4, number definitely to be determined based on looking at the district councils and how many planning decisions they take currently, and we'd also need to have a look at our scheme of delegation.
I think that would be useful to have a bit more clarity within the business case, because I think planning is one of the main things that residents and us as councillors are the most concerned about. So I think that would be useful to have a bit more clarity on that. Declan?
Try and pick up the other points. The survey, we accept, and kind of probably every authority in the country that's doing this at the moment accepts you kind of get a relatively small number, but it's worth bearing in mind this is just an engagement exercise at this moment in time. So you're just trying to, in some ways, it's not so much the importance of the numbers, it's just getting a read of what people are thinking, what are their worries about it, what are the strengths they think about, and then trying to sort of incorporate that into the business case. So we're pretty happy from the different avenues we took. That obviously the online survey wasn't the only one. We did do direct engagement with members of the public, so you'd get to have a bit more of a chat with them and really sort of unpick what they're thinking. Obviously, we talked to voluntary groups, parish councils as well. So we're happy from that sort of breadth of the engagement, and obviously looking at concerns that get raised elsewhere or strengths that get raised elsewhere in other cases. It was sort of it was good. It was a good exercise for building the business case. The actual consultation itself is undertaken by government in the new year, when it's kind of the final, I don't know, probably 3 cases that they'll put forward for sort of consultation, again, not just by public, but a lot of sort of different partner organisations, and that's where the key consultation takes place. And the final point about the different district council approaches, that absolutely is to me, that's a strength of kind of the single unitary case, that this isn't just about trying to bring the organisations together. We talk about sort of a lot of the sort of the council overhead. So it's not just about sort of trimming that back. It's about what's the best way of operating in Leicestershire. And to your point, not every district has a housing revenue account, and that does feel a weakness for Leicestershire to me. That actually, in the future, subject to the kind of new administration, we can look at having a kind of a housing stock across every district of the county, and we sort of you put everybody on that same footing as opposed to a little bit of a postcode lottery at the moment. So I do take your point. You can kind of sometimes different approaches can drive a little bit of innovation, but a large authority doesn't have to do everything exactly the same way. You can pilot different approaches in different areas to work out what is the right approach. You don't have to be kind of constrained to the boundaries of a county. You can look elsewhere at what other people do better. So I think it can still be a sort of a strength of the single unitary.
Just picking up on that engagement, obviously we did engagement prior to the March interim submission. Has that been added into the main business case as well?
No, absolutely. It's a good point that it wasn't just about the stuff we did over the summer. There was sort of previous sort of work done as well, and that all gets incorporated. Like I say, it's those thoughts and views of people as opposed to the raw numbers that we're really interested in.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Obviously, we've got it now. I'm not going to dwell on this, but it would have been helpful to, obviously, it goes without saying, it would have been more helpful to have had it some time ago. But we are where we are. I'm very grateful for the notes about collaborative working and data sharing, and I just wanted to ask, because obviously I'd read those in the other reports, and as Chief said, that was somewhat surprised to see that actually being stated in a public document about that. So I'm just wondering, are these notes going to be sent to the districts in Rutland and shared with all their councillors to rebut the points that have been made by the districts and Rutland in their business case? Because it is concerning. This kind of disagreements, if I can put it like that. But then the other thing I wanted to just the two questions I had. One is about the area committees, and I am concerned about this because in the North City South proposal, it wants to use GP practice areas, what are called primary care networks, as essentially a building block, which I kind of get that on one level, but on another level, why we're using kind of, why would you want to do that? So I'm a bit concerned about the area committee of what definition of what the area is. I know that's probably a bit of detail at the moment, but I'm just trying to understand how those areas are going to be defined. What mechanism is that going to be down to the new shadow authority if and when it gets when it gets set up to actually work out what those areas are and who the partners are, or are different partners going to be on different area committees subject to whoever's on that area committee? And that then brings me back to the numbers of councillors. Now, if we're going to have area committees and we're going to be in effect doing a lot of detail at a very low level as a councillor, that's very time consuming. And then we're going to have 2 or more planning committees to deal with planning and other committees as well. And I'm a bit concerned that, as I said earlier at the last meeting, I don't think 90 councillors is enough, because it's not going to be enough to do, if you're going to have area committees doing lots of smaller detail on the ground of having to be more involved in things, I'm not convinced that's enough, depending on how big the areas are, if that makes sense. And I think it concerns me that the workload on a councillor might just become a bit too much, because the government determines that we're volunteers, and I'll just put that in inverted commas, right? So if that's the case and our status is still volunteers, albeit we get allowance for different levels of responsibility, and if that doesn't change, then how's this going to work? And I'm a bit concerned about this, that we're in effect, depending on how big these areas are, how often these area committees would have to meet, as well as everything else that we would have to, like things like a scrutiny commission, we'd have scrutiny committees or whatever the new thing is, and lots of other meetings to attend. Then how would that actually be able to logistically work? And that's the bit I kind of a bit concerned about. And then coming to and just that links with the planning. I'm not convinced that's the right answer. To have a central planning committee that decides big things, and then little committees, other committees of planning, which will decide other planning decisions. I'm a bit concerned about that. I'm not sure that's the right answer. I haven't got an answer, but I'm not sure that's the right answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I'll try and pick up some of those points. So on area committees, in terms of how the area is defined, we've obviously not said in the business case because we don't think it's really our place to impose top down. I think I said last week that we've tried to impose area committee model neighbourhood forums down on a top down level previously, and it didn't work very well, and we got a lot of backlash for trying to tell people what their local areas were. So there's a view that we should work with local areas to define what those local areas are, but one of our suggestions will be to work on parliamentary constituency boundaries. That would give 7-ish area committees. It would be something like that. There's other options. They're not going to be small area committees. They're going to be reasonably sized. Otherwise, it's just going to be too much work for everyone involved. In terms of the number of councillors, 90 is right close to the top end of what the Boundary Commission are accepting. Their top number is 99, so we are close to the top. And I think it's worth making the point that there'd be more members for the county council services than there currently are, because obviously currently there's only 55 councillors for the county council, so you would have a smaller number of constituents than you currently have as a county councillor in the new unitary authority, admittedly with a more community role to play, but hopefully it will work out. And if not, the Boundary Commission will come in and we'll have a look, and one of the main things they look at is, have you got the right number of councillors to do your business? That's really what they're concerned with. So we're aiming to be in line with Boundary Commission advice, but they will be coming in to do a review. And for planning, I was just going to pass over to Anne.
I would just add to what Rosemary said there in terms of obviously, it'd be a decision for the new authority as to what would be the right size for area committees for the planning side of it. But whatever size you end up with, they will have to be in line with the local plan for the new unitary authority, and obviously the new strategic development strategies that the Planning and Infrastructure Bill is bringing in when that goes through its final process next year, and that will be the strategic planning level. So again, the system that Rosemary outlined of one kind of central one dealing with the large planning applications and then your local ones area based, whatever you end up with there, they will have to be making planning decisions in line with those statutory documents, because you can't forget that strategic aspect for those bigger developments.
So I try and answer Mr. King's first question. And just before I do, also in respect of planning, we need to see what the government's going to come up with in this planning bill. As it said, it wants to streamline planning, and there will be planning powers resting with the new strategic authority. The question what is left for local authorities remains to be seen. So that is something which has to be clarified in the medium to longer term, I think, and it's important to recognise that. The answer to Mr. King's first point, I think we'll be guided by members as to what we do with those two notes. I think there is a risk if we get involved in a ping pong of email exchanges about who said what, who did what. I think I'd prefer, again, subject to members' views, just to leave our view on the record and see what that produces. I think we could do that by including it, for example, at the end of the executive summary of the business case rather than within the business case itself. Not to follow the line the districts have taken, but it is really disappointing that they've included something like that, which isn't backed up by the evidence.
And just to clarify, I was acting leader at that point, and I can categorically lie, that's not what happened up to that point. So I think we do need to rebut it, but it's like you say, we had a lot of ping-ponging before. We don't want to end up in there. So I think probably a note at the end of the executive summary setting out what actually did happen between December and when we submitted is probably the right way to go on that. James, very quickly, a lot of people waiting to speak.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks for those answers. Personally, I do think it is worth sending something across to, I get your point, Chief, about that, but the districts are making a big thing about it in all their presentations to members. I just put my other hat on for 10 seconds and I've got a meeting tonight and they're going to talk about it a lot at that meeting. Some of those meetings have already taken place, I know. So, but the other thing I just wanted to say about the business case, I think personally, what would be extremely helpful is, and I'm not sure if it's in here because I can't find it at the moment, but is there a table or anything about the gross expenditure of all the different authorities across LLR at the moment? A sort of summary of, a neat summary of how much we all spend, how many people we employ, etc., etc. Because I can't see that anywhere. If there isn't, I think it'd be quite useful to have that in one of the appendices or something, because then that helps you work out, understand the potential savings or efficiencies. Thank you.
We can add something on that lens. We use the line of sort of the 80-20 quite a bit. We spend 80% of the council expenditure, and I'm just struggling to find it, but there is a little chart in the finance section that kind of gives you an idea of kind of the relative spend across the key service areas of sort of county to the district. And it's to try and rebut that kind of concerns of people sort of that we're over scaling up, that actually it's trying to give people a bit of assurance that it's quite small increases in terms of the existing services that we've got. But we can have a look at that if you want, sort of like almost the facts and figures of the kind of the local area type thing.
Just picking up on that piece about the districts, maybe we'll pick that at the end. I was going to recommend to Scrutiny Commission that we obviously these comments are going to Cabinet for them to make the final decision, that we put that within our recommendations to Cabinet for them to write to the districts. And I was going to ask Commission if they're happy as well at the end of that for us to get a response to Cabinet as to what our suggestions have gone forward from Scrutiny Commission as well. So perhaps we'll pick that up at the end. James, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are around sort of civic and democratic side of the plan. I do think, and I've said really since day one on this, that I think it's vital that we acknowledge, respect, and put clearly in the plan that what this is not is a Leicestershire takeover of Rutland. This is a union of two completely separate historic counties within one authority. And I think it's important for both sides of the border, but especially the Rutland side of the border, to acknowledge that this is not going back to the days when Rutland was a borough in Leicestershire. This is a county called Leicestershire and a county called Rutland who are in one authority together. And that should therefore be reflected in the plan in terms of perhaps the name of the plan, the name of the new council, the Leicestershire and Rutland Council, and so forth like that. And the plan does talk about keeping the civic elements of Rutland, so presumably all of the offices and stuff that it has at the moment. So I do think that's important, and I think that's important to stress all the way through. This is not a takeover. This is a union of two independent counties coming together because we have to, and because because it's required. So that's a point I think that I wanted to stress, and I think needs really to come out in the plan in a big way. We've talked about local committees and the powers it has on planning. I do think that's important, and we look at it to get it right. I think there's actually an opportunity here potentially to have it even more relevant and local than we do at the moment. Now, my patch is in Charnwood Borough, and I was for nearly 10 years at Charnwood Borough Council. And obviously that is more local than a county-wide would be. However, the reality is in my patch in Syston and the villages beyond it, it's still a long way from Shepshed, for instance, where the considerations are different, democracies are slightly different and so forth. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that being in a borough or indeed in a north-south sort of situation would inherently make it more local and more locally relevant to the specific village or town or whatever than an area system would be. And with that in mind, I think we've got a real opportunity here to sort of design it in a way that makes it relevant to that. So I think certainly going along the lines of constituencies probably would be a good way of doing that. And I think possibly would make it more locally relevant. So people in my patch has probably got more in common with areas in Melton, for instance, than it necessarily would be, as I say, with Shepshed or Haddon or somewhere like that. So I think there's a real opportunity there. So there are potentials for concerns, but also the potentials to make this more local and relevant and a better outcome. I hear the point about Mr. King makes in terms of doubling up services, and I think that the point the chief exec makes about whether actually ends up getting took above council level to sort of to a sort of LLR basis might take that away anyway, because you're talking about wider strategic decision making. If that's done by a mayor in the future, then at that point you probably don't need a Leicestershire and Rutland wide council. You just do it on the committee basis. So that's to be determined. And final point, for me, what I really like about the sort of council side of things compared to what I've found sometimes at boroughs is having the single member with single area relationship. Okay, so and I would like to see that retained if possible. I again, I can only speak for myself, but I wouldn't want to see a situation where a new authority had an awful lot of double or triple members sort of situation. I would rather have smaller but single member divisions to have that, so people know it's me they come to, and I know it's them, and I'm not having to coordinate with colleagues and stuff. Now I say that with the background of saying I've spent virtually my whole time, I think, in fact, my whole time as a single member. But I know that from colleagues and elsewhere, there is that sort of, it sometimes works better as an individual. I'm responsible for my residents, and they can come to me, and that's very clear and that's very direct, and we can build that sort of relationship up. So if it was at all possible, and I fully appreciate the maths might not work on it, but if it was possible, I would like to see that. And then my comments more than questions.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't pick a question up there, but
No.
I'm taking your points down. Yeah. Anything you want to come back on, or?
Just on the last point, to say that we can put a line into the business case to say that it would be our preference to maintain single area wards, and if the maths works out, then the maths works out, and we'll hope it does.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to the officers. They've done an incredible amount of work since the last meeting to produce the document that they have 156 pages. So well done on that, and it covers off a lot of the things. Hence, not that many questions on the technicalities of the plan. But there are two things that stand out to me. One is obviously the size of what Leicestershire County Council is. The new unitary authority is going to be near enough 750 to 800,000, depending on the exact numbers. And I think we've forgotten that the government is going to be looking at how that authority will evolve over the next decade and probably a bit longer. So if we're going to submit a case that says, well, Leicester City is going to stay at 375 to 400,000, and we're going to take the rest plus Rutland, and then times that by a decade's worth of growth, then Leicester City is probably going to stay about 400,000, and we're going to be now 1 million people. I think that's a hard pill to swallow if you're a civil servant, to say actually that's the model we're going to go with, because that looks correct. Because if you're honest about it, it's not correct. You wouldn't go for that model. So there is a gap in our submission there, and I think the Scrutiny Commission should point that out, because obviously if we're saying we're meeting all the criteria, this is one where it doesn't meet the criteria, the government's criteria. And the second one that potentially might trip us up is Rutland, and I think Mr. Poland mentioned it. We don't have to get them on side, because there's nothing to say that we have to get them on side, but we have to acknowledge, and I think acknowledging that they may look elsewhere isn't a weakness. It's just saying, look, we've acknowledged that one, but we think Leicestershire and the one unitary model is the best fit for Rutland, and these are our reasons for it, X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be. Because the worst thing is that we submit this submission, and then Rutland write a letter to the minister saying we don't agree with this submission at all, and we've had no communications or anything like that. But if we acknowledge it in our report, that nullifies that in that respect. So they're the two comments I'm going to make, Chair. Thank you very much.
Mr. Harrison, did you want to come at this one?
Chair, It's been mentioned several times now in Rutland. I met last week with the leader of Rutland and went through a whole range of different things, but their civic, they're really keen. They don't want to lose their civic role. That's important. That binds their community together. So I quite rightly understood that. Her view is, let me see your plan. What does it mean, etc., etc. So we will be obviously sending all the details to her because I think it's important. It's more logical she's with us than going into another county, and more logical than probably getting involved in smaller units, because my proposal is that we have unified. And I just want to clarify, because we're already delivering these, we already have this. What we're looking to is how we can enhance and get closer to people and empower local people, because that's going to be important. That's my mission, to see how we can empower local people to take a little bit more control and involvement in what we're talking about. And I think it's going to be important to be able to achieve that. So yes, I've spoke with them. We've had a good frank exchange, and I'm just now waiting for us to be able to send them the detail. They've got a meeting, I think 2 or 3 days just before the submission, so it'll all be down to the why stuff. But thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any comments from Mr. Smith? I just want to pick up about the compliant. I recall, it's quite a long time since I read it, that it says any new unitaries should look to get towards the 500,000. There's nothing in there about existing unitaries getting to that 500,000 population mark, unless I'm incorrect.
In the original invitation letter, I think there was encouragement to existing unitaries to expand towards 500,000 if they felt that was a means of making them financially sustainable. So certainly that's the view the city and other smaller unitaries have taken. Unitaries down to 150 and up to 350, 400, they've all taken the same view. Just on Mr. Mears' first point, though, I think we need to be careful how we reflected that in the business case, because it could be construed as an argument for a city boundary extension.
I certainly don't want. Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thanks to everybody involved. It's a massive task, and despite some of the criticism of the time taken, I think it's been worth taking the time, reviewing, talking to the different parties, and getting to a position that I think maybe the majority of us can back. I just wanted to talk about city expansion. The council is 100% against city expansion. I think all political groups have made that very clear. Do we need to make that clear in our proposition that that we have got either a majority or at least everybody against city expansion, and that's very clear. The other thing is, and I'm thinking ahead, if the government come back with a proposal that includes city expansion, should we also ask for the ability to take that to referendum?
You could do both of those in the business case. It would be part of the Cabinet's decision on the final submission, but yes, we could do that.
Mr. Wills.
Thank you very much. I share some of the sentiments that Michael said earlier around, obviously, my starting position is I think this fundamentally is the wrong approach, having a single unitary, and I will stick by that, having listened to various arguments at both the borough and here now at the county. I do have some questions. The first one is around real parish conversation and collaboration. I'm a parish councillor. I visit 3 parish councils as part of my county role, and there's not an appetite at all to take on more responsibility. These are, we talked about volunteers in our role. These are volunteers who generally have got involved in their communities to run things like the Christmas lights we're about to do. They are doing tasks which are vital, but they are not strategic in any nature. I wonder what true conversation has happened with the parishes. We do a parish forum at the borough. I know that. I'm assuming other districts do similar work. Most of them are actually understaffed as councillors. They've got vacancies in most of the parishes I visit. I just want to know what conversations happened, because I doubt they are willing to take on more responsibility. From the conversations I've had, there's no appetite. There's not actually the will there. That was my first question. On the capacity issue of councillors, I feel blessed actually. In my county ward, I work with 7 borough councillors, 3 in my own ward, 3 in Barwell and 1 in Barlston. And I dread to think what would happen if it all came to me, Mr. Poland. And I've just checked, and in Syston alone, you've got 3 district councillors who are probably doing some of the work for you, probably never realise. By getting rid of district councillors and borough councillors, the workload would be unimaginable. If you're not a borough or district councillor, you do not know the amount of work that flows from both my email addresses on top of a 40-hour week and 3 children. That is not possible to have single member boards. I refuse to believe it, because I see the workload that goes on at both levels. So I hope that isn't now part of our this proposal going forward, because I think it's a fundamental error. And also, this is a question, that's capacity of councillors to do that work. You're also now getting rid of probably middle managers, I'm assuming, is where you're going to get the majority of savings from. What capacity within the current staff here at County Hall do you have to take on extra services? Because again, there's a huge amount of work that goes on at borough and county level. And from all the reports I see through Scrutiny, through the other scrutiny committees I'm on, you're already working at capacity and beyond. And it's amazing the work you do. But how can you possibly take more on and save money? That doesn't work out for me. That's my second question. And then my third, well, it's not really a question, but I hope there's a reflection on this. It's the chart on page 38 in the report, the tiering system. I would say you've been, to be kind, disingenuous with the scoring for the 3 unitary council response. At worst, biased. And I think this is a real opportunity to just review this. And I'll use one example on this, and that's on the enable stronger community engagement. Arbitrary boundaries will damage Leicestershire's identity. Surely nothing damages identity more than taking away the thing they identify with, and that's your boroughs and your districts. You know, that is your most local form of identification. So I think that's a great example. You give it a 2. That's not genuine, surely. And I think if you're going to be honest and have the most robust form of package going forward, you need to relook at this and be honest in your appraisal, because that isn't, is it? Thank you very much.
Start on that one. Mr. Harrison?
Yes. I think the whole thing where we are with this is simply that, you know, the structures are being laid out. Government said this has got to happen. So now we're responding to it in a proper, meaningful way. We already operate the county, so that covers everything. So a lot of the argument was about how do we dish out the jobs and everything else, and how the boundaries are structured. That's important, I agree. But there is an element of not evolution, but I think there's going to be planning where we will be able to look at the structures closer. We will have to look at how the districts and how we'd look in parliamentary, how that operates, because there's got to be some definition. I mean, if you say to somebody, where do you live? I live in Leicestershire, so-and-so, you know, so people do resonate with that structure of its historical element of it. So it is sort of easing our way through. I spoke to clerks of 70 parish councils, and it was a very good and meaningful hour or whatever it was, went over an hour, and they were asking all the questions, and the feedback was that was acceptable. I want to do that again if possible, because the more we talk and explain and listen to people, because mainly it's a concern, is a worry, because you don't understand the result. So we've got to now try and help people to try to understand as we go forward. But there's a lot of work going into it, I can assure you, and I've met with business groups, etc. The businesses are concerned to know the proper structure, that they can rely on a structure that's going to be helpful to them as they go forward. So there's lots, it's a really big job. It's you know, I'm not trying to simplify it, I'm accepting it is, but I believe what the structure eventually will be practical and sensible in how it's going to work with the numbers and the areas and everything else. So I'd leave it there, but trust me, it's going to be different to what your assumption is, because it's got to have ability to be able to work. Then you spoke about salaries and everything. Nobody's even mentioned that. That's eventually the allowance. I think somebody mentioned allowance, the time and the effort that goes into it. Well, that will all be looked at. Those of us who were here in 2019 and remember all sorts of comments made, but nobody's ever brought it up as yet. And I presume eventually one day somebody will have a look at the allowance and responsibilities. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Just a couple of points from me as well. The role description of a unitary council is far different to that of a county council and a borough council. And I think the point that the areas will be a lot smaller, I think is a good point to make. And I think, Rosemary, have we got one or two areas that are twinned for county, possibly?
Two.
Two.
Being Wigston and
So
Glenfield
the
were-
norm and what I've seen elsewhere is single councillor wards, and I agree with James. We're trying to simplify the system, so just knowing one person that you need to go to is the way forward to me. So I wouldn't support twin hatters of different areas. It does work sometimes it doesn't, but I think we need to be aware that a unitary council is a totally different beast to being a county councillor or a borough councillor. It's a totally different role. So I think, councillors need to be aware of that. Anything else you wanted to pick up from those comments?
Can pick up the question about middle management, because it's really important to realise that sort of reorganisation or unitarisations, that it's savings from elimination of work as opposed to just consolidating and expecting people to keep doing additional things. So the most basic example is at the moment in Leicestershire and Rutland as well. You can bring that in. We've got 9 different authorities producing things like having statements of accounts. That disappears. You only end up with one statement of account for the sort of the enlarged organisation. So it doesn't take 9 times as long to do that sort of statement of accounts. Actually, it might take a little bit longer because I don't know if you can imagine the county council's accounts become a little bit more complex because you've got sort of some more services to do. You might have a housing revenue account, but fundamentally you're taking away a massive amount of work, and that's replicated across the entire of the back office. There's less meetings for democratic services to organise. We've got less IT systems to manage. When we're doing procurements, we're not having to do sort of 8 or 9 different procurement activities and then sort of review those, mobilise contractors, etc. It becomes an awful lot easier because you can do things at scale, and also even on the front line becomes easier. I forget the numbers, but both our customer service centre and the district customer service centre get an awful lot of calls where the public are frustrated that they don't know who to contact. They come through to the wrong centre, and we have to redirect when you get this sort of unhelpful merry-go-round. So that again, it's that efficiency of elimination. All that work actually disappears. You don't need the people to service that inefficiency. It's just really important to remember that, because you're right. We couldn't just absorb what the districts do, but we can. If we eliminate work, then you can operate on a sort of a lower staff base.
Anne, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Just wanted to come in on your point about parish councils. Absolutely. We've got well over 200 parish councils, and in there you've got a spectrum. Ones that are, and it's all volunteers. I absolutely appreciate that. Ones that are less likely to take anything on or are doing the bare minimum because that's all they're able to do, but ones that are really, really keen to take on more. Under highways, we've done a pilot of working with parish councils and some of them becoming a trusted partner to devolve various services down because they want to take them on. But it's very much around where they want to take on additional services. And that's something I think, under the model that, that this sets out could be considered by a new unitary authority. We will always offer the base service. However, if some wanted to take on more and do a bit more for their area, we've been looking at a route to allow those willing to do that or wanting to do that to enable them to do that.
Okay, Mrs. Page.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I do think a lot of work has gone into it, but it is nowhere going to be as much as there will be when we are going to be confronted with the outcome of this restructuring. I've heard all of the comments, and just a couple of personal points on that. I think that a lot of the district's responsibilities are an extension of what is being done here anyway. So I can't see of having one unitary will make that much difference, because planning, housing, community infrastructure level, all of that being on the same footing, in my opinion, may be beneficial at the end of the day. I think as councillors, I have been working, and I hate to say this, for 26 years doing a lot of the work for district councillors, and I'm actually doing work for my parish councils, and it does actually work. You can do it. It is possible, but everything is very much relative. What happens in Harborough in one council doesn't happen in Oglethorpe or in Chepshed. And I think will all come out in the wash, and it is depending on the individual councillors. But I once was told, if you don't like the workload and if you don't like the job, don't volunteer for it, because you know what you are going to take on at the end of the day. My ultimate concerns are 2 points. One is, and we have talked about parishes, I used to go around, and remember, I was here before when we considered this, and when we went out to parishes, and officers came with me and I went to a lot of parishes. And at the time, a lot of the issues were, yes, we have got no problems with one authority, but where we have the problem, it is with, we are volunteers. We don't want to take some on. So you have like a couple of town councils who are trained and are happy to take on, but the parishes, I have got, I think 7, they haven't got the members, and they keep telling me they're volunteers, you do. And I keep saying, yeah, well, but if you take on the role of volunteers, you do have to do something. Well, I don't want to do any more. So I think that will be the problem. And when we did it the first time around, there was a huge problem with holding parish councillors and clerk to account. And going back to my experience over the years, I have worked with MPs trying to get the Government Act change, that there are more sanctions for parish councillors and clerks who do not adhere to the Nolan principles, etc., etc. So the worry from even parish councillors, myself, it is that needs to be noticed. You can't just say parish councillors got to take some more work, and if they do have a responsibility, that they cannot be held to account if that isn't being done properly. And I do appreciate these reports are strategic, but I think, that is a point that needs to be recognised. But my main point, then there is planning. Now, all through when I talked to parishes, when we did the first representation years ago, planning was a salient aspect, because planning is parochial, because everybody is interested in what happens around them. And I think that needs to be really fleshed out if, that's going to be public buy-in. But my most important point, which hasn't been covered, was, and I'd like an answer on that, if nothing else, it is when we did the first presentation, we were talking about keeping the present councils like Hinckley, Harborough and whatever as satellite offices, so people had a place to go to. So nowhere in this report do I see anything, will combined unitary flock off, all of the council offices and take on the money, or will they keep all of the offices at satellite properties where the residents from Harborough and Hinckley can go and whatever. And I think that should be reflected in the report if possible. So, people keep that identity to their so-called area. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just pick up quickly on your point on parish councils. It obviously is a very high level, and the section on parish councils is not long, But in there, I have put about appropriate governance and monitoring arrangements will be put in place, and also that any additional services which parish and county councils deliver on behalf of the unitary council will need to be in line with its policies and priorities. So I hope that picks up your point that we have, at least if we haven't described in detail how that's going to work, we at least know that it's something that we're going to need to develop.
If I may come back, but in order to give and hold parishes and clerks to responsible, it needs changes in the Government 1990 Act. So it has to be an act of government. You know, if we just say we'll slap your wrist, it doesn't work when we're talking financial structures and whatever else.
It's more if we've devolved services to them and they don't do it in line with how we want them to do it, we'll just take them back, I think. It's not like they're taking on an additional legal function, it's just something that we're devolving.
And the point about local offices?
Yeah, so it is in the business case. Apology, it's buried on page 127, so it's forgivable that you haven't spotted it. But we have made the point that kind of we are going to ensure service points and maintaining key local areas. We'll make that a little bit more prominent because, again, the beauty of the unitary should be kind of I suppose it's the office accommodation type areas that the public don't see, or kind of rooms like this that you just don't need as many of, should be the ones that we're looking to retract back. And it's not to say there might not be any change in service points, because obviously there's an opportunity of county council service and district councils having a look at what you do in a local area, but the business case is built on the assumption that service points and key local areas are maintained.
Thank you. That is wonderful. If that could be highlighted a bit more, because that is where the identity comes from and where it will remain. Thank you for that.
Sapphire, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just in terms of the parish and town council debate, yeah, clearly it's a concern to all the members. It's been raised a number of times. We have about 300 parish and town councils plus parish meetings, so that is quite a significant spread, and there are parts of the county such as Oadby and Wigston where there's no parish and town councils. Generally, we have invested in the network, and we've got clerks meeting. We meet the chairs as well. We grant aid, or certainly commission, a Leicester and Rutland County Association, who've got extensive membership of those 300 or so parish and town councils. But to re-emphasise the point Rosemary's already made, it's not necessarily about forcing any area or any parish or town council to take on services, and it would be led by them. So through discussions we've had over certainly the 7 or 8 years I've been here, they would like to take on a community centre, a leisure centre, a cemetery, or something else, and it may be of that scale. And some of those services are currently managed by districts. We're not talking about social care, highways, infrastructure, where there's plant, there's equipment. It's too complicated. Others are quite happy to work with the local farmers to cut the hedges or clean something else. So it will depend. It will depend on the particular area. And just in terms of assurance, there is a quality standard that is available. I believe 2 or so have already got that standard, but we can work with them. But I think it will be very specific to the area and the locality.
Okay, not seeing any other members indicate. Just a couple of points from me to draw this to a close then. Disaggregation of services we've not mentioned at all today, and I think we need to keep that forefront of our mind, especially in social care, adults and children. I know from my period in Children's and Families Department, that is a huge risk if we start splitting those services up. So just wanted to make sure that's on the record because it's not been mentioned this morning. So just a couple of points from me. On page 16 of the pack, page 9 of the business case, the second to bottom paragraph, where it says Leicestershire County Council and Leicester City have agreed the principle that the best option for reorganisation is one unitary for the county and one for the city. I think we should add in there that we don't agree to a city expansion. I think that needs strengthening up that paragraph a little bit as well, just to make that very clear. I know it's further on in the business case, but I think it needs to be in there as well. And just one other point from me is about, we've got an item on the agenda, the item 8, the annual delivery report, that has a huge amount of really rich data in how this county council is performing already. And I don't know whether that should be included within the business case, whether it's an appendix or something. I think that just demonstrates how well this county council is and has performed in the past. And I think that's one of our key strengths about going into this, is that why would you split up an excellent performing county council? So I don't know if that can be looked at, whether it's too big as an appendix or whether bits can be taken out, or I don't know what your thoughts on that.
We can certainly have a look, even if we sort of summarise it down to kind of the key points about the kind of the, because you're right, it's a useful sort of document. And it is based on a very wide range of indicators. It's not just a couple of KPIs. So no, we can have a look at that.
Well, just obviously all the comments that we made today will be put into report, and I take it that'll go to full council on Wednesday and then also to cabinet for the decision when they meet later on in November. And we just need to deal with the districts that the chief arranged. What I think should be the best way for us to deal with that is send that to the cabinet with our recommendations that the districts are written to, just to give the correct details as we see it. And maybe we should send that as a recommendation to cabinet that they write on behalf of the council to the districts and whoever's leading it for the districts. And then I did raise the point that all our comments and recommendations that we're going to send to council and cabinet, the Scrutiny Commission would like a response back from the cabinet about what they've taken on board, and if they haven't, why they haven't. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, we all agreed on that? Okay, and just to end, just thank you very much to all the officers, but especially to Rose. I know she's worked incredibly hard on this. I think she needs singling out as the person that's wrote probably the most of this business case. So well done to you, Rosemary, as well. Okay, thank you for everyone joining us for that piece as well. Okay, we'll now move on. So we brought forward the MTFS. So it is item 9 on your agenda, but we're bringing that forward now. Is Mr. Fowler joining us, do we know, as lead member? No, okay. So we'll now take as agreed item 10, which is the medium-term financial strategy report. Members will have received a supplementary report, which was circulated and published on the council website last week. So Simone Hines, the Assistant Director of Corporate Resources, will be introducing the report, and supported by Declan Keegan, the Director, and then obviously the leader, Mr. Harrison here. Mr. Fowler's not here as the lead member for resources, will stay for this item. So Simone, over to you.
So the first section of the report deals with the position for the current financial year, and it does show, although there is still a forecast overspend of around 2.9 million, that is an improvement on the previously reported position at P4, which was just over 8 million. So there is an improving trend. That said, there are still two main drivers of overspend in the position, and they've stayed largely the same as the previous report. So firstly, we still have pressures on children's social care placements and are forecasting around £11.6 million overspend so far this year, and that then is forecast through to the end of the year as well. That's due to both, there is an increased number of children in care overall, but particularly we have, and these are the messages we heard before, but again, we've got more children in residential provision, and it is that's causing the particular issue with the overspend. That is the top provision that is the most costliest and can cost an average around 15k per week, but actually we've got some examples at the moment where that are much in excess of that because of the type of provision that those children are requiring. We've also got a continued increased demand for special educational needs services, which again is a similar position that we talked about before. We are still forecasting a deficit around 46 million this year compared to the budgeted deficit of 15 million. So at the start of the year, we were expecting a deficit, but it's clearly considerably more than that initial forecast. And that is because of just the level of increased demand for EHCP since the start of the year. I think it's about 15% increase in the number of EHCP since January, and we've now got about 8,300 of those packages in place. And although that's funded from within the Dedicated Schools grant, it is underfunded, and the government does not provide enough funding to meet that demand. So it's placing a strain on the council's finances, not just in terms of that DSG grant, but also elsewhere, which I'll touch on in a moment. There is still the statutory override in place, which members may remember from before, which keeps that debt off balance sheet and means we don't have to sort of provide for it in the budget in full, but that is only temporary, and we don't have any clarity yet as to how the government plan to deal with that historic deficit and the ongoing issues. We were expecting a white paper on send reforms in early autumn. That's now been delayed until the new year or into next year. So that, that's just creating further uncertainty. We are hoping that there'll be some clarity about dealing with the historic deficit as part of the settlement maybe before Christmas, but I don't have that absolute certainty yet. We do continue to make a partial provision towards that deficit, which is reflected in the overspend position. So we have increased the contribution that we make towards that deficit, which is coming through the revenue position in the report. If that current trend continues, the cumulative deficit for the council will exceed 100 million by the end of the year, about 110, based on those current forecasts. And as I mentioned earlier, that does put a strain on the council in other ways. So in terms of our investment income, we are cash flowing that deficit. So, there is an impact on lost investment income, as well as other demands such as send transport as well. The Director of Children's Services is looking at options to manage that demand, particularly the demand for EHCPs, and how we can reduce the unit costs of them as well. And there was a specific scrutiny session that looked at that in more detail in October. Just then, aside from children's and send pressures, other council services are operating largely within budget with some underspends coming through now as well. So both adults, communities and environment and transport are now forecasting slightly higher underspends than before. And then alongside increased investment income and some debt repayment and reduced inflation, those underspends are helping to mitigate those children's and send pressures and bring that overspend down to a more manageable position. Okay, then aside from the period 6 position that I've just outlined, the sort of later sections of the report then go on to include an update on the efficiency review, and that is from paragraph 66 of the report. Now that is going to play a key part in helping the council close its future years MTFS gaps and sort of particular focus on 26-27 as well. Cabinet approved the contract award, as you'll be aware, in late October, and we're now well underway with mobilising that contract and that review. And we will be that review will involve an unconstrained review of the council's current cost base, and we are looking to complete that at pace and as quickly as possible. The first part of that review will look at the council's current savings plans, look at how we can maybe accelerate some of those or increase the scope of them, for instance. And we're expecting initial findings from that work to be reflected in the draft budget report when that comes to Cabinet in December. And then that will also come to scrutiny in January, as the usual draft budget report would do. The review then will move on to look at any new opportunities that might not be in the MTFS at all yet that we could work up. Then once the review is complete, there'll be a separate decision about any further support that we might need or want to implement any of the recommendations, but that will be for a later decision. But clearly that is going to be a key piece of work to support the council in setting its budget for next year and in closing its MTFS gap, and there is a lot of time and effort on that at the moment. They were the key points from the report that I wanted to highlight. I'm really happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I'm going to jump in with the first question. The overspend on the high needs block forecast to be 45.7 million this year, which near enough doubles what we've already got on the books of a deficit. That's absolutely massive, to be honest. I was really shocked when I saw that figure of 45 overspend in 1 year. So that's since May this year, and you're projecting that to be at the end of April next year. And I do need to point out that that was after Newton have been in and delivered £34 million worth of cost avoidance. So if we hadn't had Newton in to do that work, you'd have another 34 million of deficit for that. I mean, that is just totally blown my mind that we can be in that position. I suppose you did mention there about, there are options being looked, but I don't know what options you're thinking of being like. I know Tim's here as well, whether he wants to take that, but as far as I was concerned, the Newton were going to come in, new ways of working. This was hopefully going to stop all that demand coming through, and it just seems to just exploded. So that's a real risk for this council and not a good place to be in. So just a bit more meat on the bones around that, if possible, please.
Tim might want to come in and give some further detail, but I think the first thing to say is we're not alone. I don't think we're an outlier in this position. I think the increased demand for send is being seen, but by many authorities up and down the country, and I imagine there's lots of authorities also looking at ways to mitigate demand in this way. But I'll hand over to Tim for more detail.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Chair. So certainly we're seeing a massive upturn in demand, although at a slightly lower level than others are seeing as well. So we're managing to mitigate some of that pressure. The latest upsurge in demand since January is by and large because of delays and worries over the white paper. Over the last 5 years, we've seen the numbers of requests, parental requests for EHCPs rise from around 19%. It's now 48% of the total number coming in. So it's worries and concerns that families have over some of the rhetoric that's been in the media that EHCPs may no longer exist. So that upsurge has meant that we've hit the forecasted number of EHCPs that we were expecting 3 years early, which has added the pressure. And when you project that forward, it does show that by 2030 we could have a deficit of upwards of £400 million as a result. As Simone mentions, we've been campaigning hard around what the arrangements will be to address the cumulative deficit and presumably some sort of capitalisation. But again, we've yet to hear, and there is talk around some solutions being given with the spending review. There's 4 main areas that you would look at if you were going to try and mitigate the increased overspend. First of all, you're looking at reducing the number of EHCP requests because that drives the overarching packages. We've also been doing a lot of work, and particularly with the Newton work, was around increasing the use of mainstream schools. Because again, if children's needs can be met in mainstream schools with mainstream inclusion strategies, that reduces the pressure also. I would say that independent specialist provision is also a key cost driver. We've seen the demand for ISPs outstrip capacity across the country, and we're no different. Around 95% of our independent specialist placements are due to there being insufficient local maintained specialist placement provision. So if we can divert some of that pressure away from special ISPs to our local specialist mainstream schools, that is again a key area, and we are doing a lot of work around that as well. And the fourth area that drives that pressure is around exclusions. Whilst Leicestershire has a lower exclusion rates than comparators and nationally, they are creeping up as they are elsewhere, but that puts more pressure on the high needs budget also. So there's a number of things we're doing. We are working with schools on what their local inclusion offer will be so that we can reduce the pressure and the need for EHCPs and stopping that escalation through to statutory services. We're also working with our mainstream providers around creating enhanced resource bases. We've had a number come online this year, which has saved or cost avoided over £1 million already. We've got 7 more coming online the next academic year and 7 the year after. So that's a rolling programme we'll look to continue with. And I suspect that will be a core part of the schools white paper when that's released. We've also started feasibility studies on a new area-based special school for the county. And again, that will cost avoid many millions of pounds once that opens its doors. So again, that's another key strategy. And we've also enhanced the work of Oakfield School to stop that escalation through to statutory services of children at risk of exclusion. So that's through their outreach service, which will come online fully in January. And again, I think that will be part of the key aspects of the schools white paper about how local teams can support those schools and those children with more pressing needs. And all of that's captured within our education belonging strategy, which we're developing at the moment, and we'll be talking to you more about that in due course, but that pulls everything together as one coherent plan.
Mr. Harrison, obviously the member's not here, so do you want to just obviously your view on this huge deficit that's been built up in the last few months?
Obviously since May, once you look at these numbers and you start to realise and then talk to officers, and you can see that there is a massive trend. So obviously then you have to think of how we're going to deal with this. Tim's spoke to us in cabinet briefings and in detail, and I'm confident. I met some people from schools, and one school had up to 150 children that they were looked and classified, etc. And I think the thing is we've got to try and work hard to push that scheme forward, because that's clearly taking some of the pressures off us, which is just growing and growing. We predict there could be a slowdown, but hey, it's only a prediction. So it's not, there's nothing concrete other than, you know, let's back ourselves up as much as we can, try and look at what we can do in the future, how we can head this off. And that could be the only answer, is trying to probably look at the schools that are already taking initiatives and how we can support them to take on a little bit more, because that's going to be the way. If we can open that gate and it starts to evolve and develop, well, then that would be a saving grace for us, because you've heard, Madam Chairman, it's astronomical. It's across the country, and, you know, it's just taken really experienced staff who've been involved for years looking, wow, where's this come from? So very, very concerned, and obviously that and others' information spurred me on to thinking we've got to find a way through this and try and look at efficiencies, how we're going to save and how we're going to move forward. So in my mind, the schools are important and massively, but I hope obviously the plan that we're now undertaking and is beginning to progress will start to deliver real benefits to us and help us on the way forward, because we just can't sit and hope for the sun to shine. We've got to be very, very proactive.
Thank you. Mrs. Page.
Thank you. That is, and my concern as well, but could you please explain to me, and you did say it is across the country, but to have an increase of 48% parental requests, there must be a driver somewhere. And I'd like to get my head around it. Why, in your opinion, it is like that? Why are we in this position, and what does parents, what's the driver behind that? I need to understand a little bit more to get my head around this. And then we are saying there is a plan that we're progressing. Now, is that plan to look in the future to reducing these special requests? Because Mrs. A might say, oh yeah, my son, little Johnny, gets it, so why don't you go, Mrs. B? So, and then you get an escalation. So how are we looking to, in the plan, to reduce it? And what does this independent special request actually covers? What's the legal remit? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So quite a lot in that, but I'll take each point. So the driver's parental preference for parental requests for EHCPs is really driven more recently through the uncertainty over the school's white paper. There was lots in the media around, and I suspect a bit of testing of the public opinion around removing the right for an education, health and care plan. And what our parental groups are telling us is that undermined parents' confidence in the ability to be able to apply for one in the future, and therefore be able to access the type of support that they feel their children would need. If you have an EHCP, you can also have a particular school named within that. So it does guarantee a school place at a particular school of a parental choice. So again, that's a big driver in EHCP requests. So I think that's the two key issues. We're looking to reduce requests by helping schools to be able to cater for a broader range of needs. So that's upskilling professionals in schools, giving them access to local support teams. Across the country, communication interaction, particularly coming out of COVID, has become one of the key drivers for special educational needs. So we are putting in place a number of projects which enables us to work and schools to work more closely with those children. And that again stops those children escalating through to statutory services. So we are finding children being able to access the curriculum has become a problem as a result. And we're working with schools to introduce something called Universal Design for Learning, which starts looking at schools delivering their curriculum in a very different way. For example, a child who has ADHD, attention hyperactive deficit disorder, will really struggle to sit quietly for some time. But actually, if they can be in the classroom walking around at the back, they can probably learn in a much more coherent way. So it is changing the way we deliver the curriculum from a very traditional Victorian approach with a teacher at the front delivering the curriculum for children sitting in their desks, to looking at more flexible ways of doing that. And that's part of our belonging strategy. So we're anticipating that variability in the classroom before we actually have to exclude children. Because I think we have to start working on the premise that we're going to have classrooms of 30, 40 or 50% of children with additional needs. So that does require some real transformational work to make sure we can meet those needs without escalating through to independent specialist provisions. And I should say that our maintained special schools deliver a first-class education. There's not a lot that an ISP or an independent special school can deliver that our own maintained special schools can as well. So our preference is always to go for a maintained special school place, which is probably around £30,000 a place, rather than a independent special school place, which is upwards of 70, 80, even up to £250,000 per place.
Mr. Bulls.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm glad those figures were pointed out there, because I think that was one of my points, that if some of that money can be diverted and we can get more children back into mainstream school, the thing that holds them back in my discussions with head teachers and with teachers and teaching assistants is there isn't the headcount within staff within schools to do this. And I think the ambition's fantastic. We spoke about this at the scrutiny the other day around changing how curriculum's delivered, but we have two barriers I see, and again it comes down to investment, and many of the schools we have aren't set up for it. You talked about Victorian style education. A lot of the infrastructure is still based around four walls, which has got limited space, and we have forest schools and brilliant initiatives, but we're still limited by the place in which we educate. And then fundamentally it's about headcount. You cannot, I know 2 or 3 schools where I am that have reduced teaching assistants because there has to be budget cutbacks, because their budgets are cut just as much as ours are. And that is the one-on-one specialist care that was put in to intervene in these children. So I think if there's any way we can redistribute budget, we can try and change budget so less money goes to independent providers and gets put back into mainstream school. I think we can hopefully cure both the problems we're facing here. And I think it is about looking at budgets and redistributing that money. And that would be my recommendation, to look at how we do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Poland.
Thank you very much. I'll keep the questions pretty succinct, I think, if possible. On the efficiency reviews, the Newton work, quite simply, why are we paying the management consultants £1.4 million to do a job Dove said they'd do for free? As simply as possible. That's the first question. And secondly, during the election, and in fact since then, the administration have been very clear that to the people of Leicestershire, and in fact to councillors at full council in Scrutiny Commission, that in the next budget would lower council tax without cutting services. We seem to be going back a little bit on the council tax promise now, but can the leader guarantee the Newton work will not result in any service cuts? First part of that question. And secondly, as a people-based organisation, can the leader guarantee that the Newton work will not result in any compulsory redundancies?
Mr. Harrison?
Thank you. To deal with the fee, they do a job of work. It's nearly 1.5, it's 1.4. If we like the results of their work that they're collating now for us, then we can make a decision whether we're going to go forward. So that's how this works. But there are a company that will put their part of their commission online if they don't perform to that certain level. There's nobody else to do that. Plus, they know this business quite well. So it is important how we approach things sensibly. I'm convinced that when we meet next month and start, this month is all about understanding. So at the moment, they told me the other day they took 80 million lines of information out of the box with everything in. Let's put it that way for simplicity. Declan already spent we spent a massive amount of time feeding them and they congratulated them. Now he said this morning, God, there's a load more requests now because they're gathering all the information to understand what they're doing. And that's part of the job. They have to know what they've got. Then they can come back with a recommendation. And I believe the recommendation will be substantial that will be able to help us because this is going to be critical. We're not going, it's no magic wand. It's got to be done professionally. They know how to do the job. They specialise in it. They're known to us to be a successful operator in what they do. So, and they appeared to be the most understanding, but then they had the experience as opposed to the other two applicants. So I am confident from what they've said and what I'm understanding that the savings will be substantial to help us because the Doge, as you mentioned, it was set up as an organisation, voluntary. There were probably skilled people, but there wasn't registered and had the documentation and everything else you need. You cannot go into a council and say, well, let me have all your goodies out the big box. It can't be done. You've got to be able to do it. And obviously that takes time and everything else. So it wasn't prepared on the scale. And what they were talking about helping people was never on the scale that I perceive we need to be able to give us a result that's really, truly beneficial. Because otherwise, why are we doing it? We're doing it because I believe it will be substantial and it will be very beneficial to us. And it's at this time when probably we're ready now for this type of thorough and in-depth review. Now, part of my election pledge was that we needed to have this major review. And once in post, and you can see the costs are there, and I'm not blaming anybody else. They're my costs now. They're not, you know, I reflect that maybe you left not a good hand, but at the end of the day, I'm more worried about how we're going to deal with this than sort of liabilities. Liabilities there as a leader, it's a big responsibility, but it's also for all other members of the council, the responsibility. We're there, we're all together in a team, and we've got to try and achieve the goal that I believe is going to be achievable with them. So I hope that helps. My comments throughout have always been guarded because what I know would be terribly wrong to talk too much, but I believe what they're doing is right and it will be of a substantial nature to be able to help us. That's what I understand. Now, when I've got that in front of me, wow, then we can talk and then we can plan accordingly. But until we're there, and obviously Declan and Simone's involved, they know what's happening. You know, I'm appraised of numbers. I know where we are on the debt side and what we've got to do. You've heard Tim now, how they're trying to wrestle their end of the business. Nobody's asleep. They're all working at the wheel and it's a combined thing. This isn't like, it's good to have the inspiration and say, look, we've got to do something. But then there's lots of people involved in all of this, consultants, yeah. But then if it wasn't for our team here, what they're doing and working and supporting them, it just wouldn't work. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
I know James probably wants to go. I just want to clarify one point before I go back to James. You said there that they'll be putting their commission online. Just to clarify, this 1.4 million is a rigid cost. It is going to cost us there.
Yeah,
it's not going to be based on what savings they produce. That's the rigid cost.
No, they're doing a job of work now, and by the time they've finished and they're able to look at those savings and say, well, that's what we've done, we've achieved that, right? Then we'll look at it and say, right, if we move forward and say this, that, and we're going to go forward with that because we can see the benefit of it, or we say goodbye, we'll try and do it ourselves. So they're not going to spend all their skilling to bring this all together and say, there it is. So if we sign, the 400,000 is refunded. So that's part of the package. So then we only on, if we sign, 250,000, sorry.
Where's the 250,000 come from?
It's a rebate back from that bill. Yeah.
But just to clarify, the 1.4 million is a rigid cost. It's not based on what they produce. That is, we've got to pay it with the 250 refund if we then take on further work.
Yes, but we already know roughly what they can. They've already cited a figure at the front door. Now we're waiting for them to go in and deep dive and understand it more. So the confidence is there. One, because we've already had a figure from them that we thought, okay, that hits the target with what we're expecting at that stage. So we have that confidence. Plus, you and yourself and other colleagues, we've all done it before with Newton. They've never failed. They are a proper professional body. So that's all we could say. Thank you, go, and we're going to try and do it. So it is the way forward, and the costings are appropriate to the work and what they can expose for us. The next stage, then, if we sign a contract, they will always put some of their fee online if they don't achieve. Now, you already know that, Madam Chair.
Yeah, so I'm still not getting the clarity I want. So Declan, maybe you could explain what the clarity, so the 1.4 million is a rigid fee. No matter what happens, we've got to pay them the 1.4 million.
So they submit an approach that they're going to sort of undertake with the council, and that approach to fill that delivers 1.4 million. Now, if they deviate from the approach, if the quality isn't there, etc., then we can withhold it. But it's just a normal contractual arrangement as any other one. But if they stick to the plan that we agreed as part of the tender, we pay them the 1.4 million. As the leaders mentioned, if we go into the implementation phase, there's a potential £250,000 discount. To your point, the 1.4 is a fee for a piece of work. And the reason we recommended that as an approach as officers is looking at sort of what's happening in other organisations' experience here, that if you start putting an incentive basis on, go out and find savings, you get a load of noise back, a load of kind of fantasy savings that you can't really kind of work with. What we wanted was good investable proposals at the end of it so we could make proper decisions, hence why we went with the 1.4 million fixed fee.
James, I'll let you come back.
Thank you, and thank you very much to the leader for the responses. Just again, just purely to clarify my understanding, then you talked about Newton being experienced and professional, and I'm sure that's absolutely the case. It's therefore accurate to say the reason we went for management consultants over Doge is because the management consultants are experienced and professional, and Doge, with the best will in the world, aren't up to the standard that we need here. And that, so effectively experienced professionals versus keen amateurs with the best of intentions, but that's what we're looking at. Is that correct? And the second one, in terms of the no service cuts guarantees, again, just to sort of clarify my understanding of your response, is it the case that you can't at this point give guarantees of no service cuts, as it will depend on what Newton put in their report?
My philosophy and that of my group is that we will never, ever undertake, providing we can. Our aim is to never cut services, but to enhance services. So that's a real commitment, part of what we're doing. And I think, well, apart from telling you that, I said it in the election, I'll say it now, we do not want to cut services. We're at a point where we've got to fund extra money for services because of where we are. And this is why this is so important, what we're doing. Whoever sat in this chair would be faced with the same problems. You can't hope to cut your way away and tax your way away. We've got to find a long-term proper solution that gives us a system that's affordable and viable with the public. It's got to be able to work. So the answer is, I do not want to ever cut services. I want to try and improve what we've got through proper efficiency. And we believe that's the safest and the best way forward to save and support our services. Because ultimately, if I go back to the 5% and trimming the budget here and there, well, it's happened for years, but we're not getting anywhere. We've got to break out of that loop if we can. That's not meant to be disparaging in any way. Unless we have fresh thinking on this to really tackle it seriously in a big way, we're going to be left where we are, sadly. So I don't want to see costs cutting, definitely. And I want to support the SEND and support the team involved in that. It's critical. We don't know who these children are and how they suffer, but we've got to be prepared to do our damnedest to try to support people and a whole range of services. And we've already heard, Tim, the deployment into schools, and also there's a lot of energy going into this because it's flipping serious. Does that help? Is that answered everything?
Yep, thank you. I just need to move on now, James. Yeah, Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now, listening to you, leader. It's interesting on one level and also incredibly frustrating at the same time. So a few weeks ago, you sat here and I asked you a load of questions and you didn't like those questions, but I'm going to ask you the same sort of questions again, because in your group's election manifesto, you said there would be tax cuts. You've gone on the radio since and said there won't be tax cuts. You also, your national leader said that Doge would be sent in to all local authorities. In fact, your first resources cabinet member said at a previous meeting of this scrutiny commission that you'd be getting Doge in. You then said you weren't getting Doge in, you were getting some consultants, which, to be fair, you have done, and they're obviously very expensive. And there's no, as you've already said, there's no guarantee of success. But it could, according to the report, in the long term, cost us up to £30 million, if not more than that, depending on what the outcome or whatever they come forward with. And ultimately, they've got to save an awful, they've got to find a lot of efficiencies, however that looks. And yet at the same time, as we've already got in the report and you've mentioned, we've got significant pressures from SEND and also from adult social care, as was mentioned at last week's adult social care meeting. So what I'm concerned about is the timescale of this, and it all goes back to what I said to you in early September, which at that meeting you said, I quote, I paraphrase slightly, you said, I've got an idea where the big savings can be had. I already know what they are. I can't tell you what they are at the moment, but I will do soon. Well, we're 2 months along and I still got no idea what your big savings idea is, apart from spending more money on some people to come in and tell us where the big, but you already said on the record that you know where the big savings are to be had. Well, please illuminate us. Please tell us where these big savings are. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask about, Chair, I do think this SEND thing, I do think we should have a more in-depth look at the Commission at a future meeting. I think it is that important. We do need to deep dive into this, because I think there's a number of concerns I've got listening to Tim. First of all, is the issue about, on one level, I understand if we can have more children with SEND in mainstream classes, yes, that's more cost effective, but also there's a detrimental effect that it could have on non-SEND children and their learning in the classroom. And I'm very concerned about what we're doing to protect them from disruption, because we know that low-level disruption, medium-level disruption in the classroom is also impacts on the learning of other children, and that concerns me as well. So on the one hand, I get that, but on the other hand, what's going to be done to stop any detrimental impact on other children and their learning and everything else? And the costs, I mean, they're just eye-boggling, you know, of how we, you know, it's ramped up. So then that comes back to, and you did mention it, it's the government, the Labour government, who've created this almost like scare tactic, panic amongst parents and carers and schools as well, to be fair. And what's concerning me is what's being done by the education authorities, not just ourselves, but others, because we're told that it's affecting all of us. Well, what are we doing with them to push back against this scaremongering tactic of the government? But, you know, unfortunately, you can't separate out the two things. But that's the two things I wanted to raise today. Thank you.
You want to come back first, Leader?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, Mr. King, sir, your preamble and the way you talk, and it goes on, and your recollection. Let me explain my recollection. It's based on their tender price of what they thought they could achieve was a figure that was substantial. Being a company that's traded here 4 or 5 times in the past, they have a record of doing so. And at the moment, I feel that we're doing the right thing. You mentioned other things, but I've spoke only this morning with Richard Tice. I think he's looking at what we're probably doing. They're looking at how they're trying to operate things. So I'm trying to be as open and as honest to you, and you should be of a skill and professional ability to think, right, Okay, I can't speak ahead of a contract finding, but I have had a flow of where indicating of what they could achieve. I've been honest, I've told you that, but I'm not prepared to open up before a contract's actually signed and they're in business. Then we'll know exactly what they're doing. So it is, patience is a virtue, and it's probably hard to accept. I'm constricted. I would love to jump up and down and say, well, look at what this is done. What can happen? I can't, because of the professional position. Contracts are involved. They're doing their work. Then we'll examine closely that work, and then we'll be hopefully full of optimism moving forward. That's the truth and the best I can tell you. There's nothing fabricated, and I hope it rests well with you until we get the evidence. I cannot work without proper evidence and proof. And if you cannot wait until then, I can't help you anymore, other than I sympathise and we're all getting on with it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And just to point out that children and families over in Scrutiny obviously do look quite in depth at this under Mr. Bull, Chairman there. And we did have this back to the Commission in October. We did have the TISL workshop as well. So yeah, just to point out, there are looked at other places. But did you want to come back?
Chair, thank you. We're just coming back to Mr. Harrison. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you're being dishonest or anything like that. I wouldn't dream of saying such a thing, and I haven't said that. I'm very happy to go back and look at the recording of the meeting, which I have done, and it's very clear what you said. And you said that you've been shown ideas, and you know where the big savings are. That was 2 months ago, and here we are. That was before you appointed the company to undertake this work. So you said you already knew where the big savings were. That is what you said, and now you're telling me you still can't tell us where the big savings are, even though you're the leader of the council. You can't give us an indication of where the big savings are, yet you say you know where they are. Okay, so I just find that it is frustrating. Yes, it is. I'd agree with that, but equally, I think what I've outlined is the fact you started off and your group started off with one position saying one thing, and now you've worked your way down to another thing. So I'm just wondering, there's also the time issue here, Chair. We haven't got very long before we've got to have, a budget for next year in place. And I really, as I said earlier at the previous meeting back in September, I really don't think there's long enough to really bring forward plans that are going to save the sort of money that we're going to need to save, or efficiencies rather, by the time the budget's got to be approved. But that's not in my hands. That's in yours and your group. Thank you.
Declan, did you want to come in?
I just draw members' attention to paragraph 79. That just sets out, I suppose, the broad framework of where Newton are proposing to kind of structure the kind of savings around. So that gives you an indication at this point about sort of the types of areas that are going to be focused on for savings. And obviously, as we go through the MTFS process, that will get developed out. So that hopefully that answers a question about where the savings all come from. Like I say, we'll keep giving you more information, which is outlined in paragraph 84, just how that'll develop a little bit through the MTFS process. The other point I just wanted to pick up was just a slight correction on the 30 million. There's no commitment to the 30 million. That's just a contract value. And the reason we put the contract value is to save ourselves having to go back and forth out for procurements. So depending on what sort of savings levels are put forward and the business cases on that individual kind of case by case basis will determine how much a future consultant gets paid. But obviously, the more we pay them, it's because they've been more successful in terms of identifying more savings. So it should be it should hopefully be a sort of a more positive message than sort of maybe seen from just focusing on the cost side of things.
Just picking up on that paragraph 79, since you highlighted it from my questions, a lot of that I'm reading there looks at cost avoidance for the future rather than actual savings. Is that a fair comment?
And if you look at our MTFS, if we weren't having the service growth and the inflation growth that we face, we'd be absolutely fine as an organisation. But that is what's really driving our kind of MTFS gap at the moment. So absolutely being able to manage the demands that come sort of, I suppose, through the front door of the authority and the need to kind of provide sort of service provision, unless we can kind of get that sort of well managed, better managed than we've got at the moment, we're always going to be behind the curve in terms of actually trying to manage the organisation. So absolutely, it needs to be an absolutely really vital point of what this project does.
And just picking up on that contract that I take it signed, even though the leader said it wasn't, it is actually signed now, isn't it? So just confirming that with Newton.
It's in progress of being signed. So we've got obviously when we went out to tender, you go out to sort of a framework of what that contract's going to look like, a lot of the sort of different schedules. That's just been worked through the sort of finer detail at the moment.
And that 30 million, obviously, depending on what they come back with about what they want to progress, is there sort of a ballpark percentage of what it costs you? If they're going to save you 30 million, how much is that going to cost the local authority? Is that sort of a ballpark figure that we know of yet?
It's under quite a big range because it depends on the kind of the complexity of the saving will depend how much they they think kind of, I suppose, external expertise required, how much capacity we've got internally and the expertise we've got internally to kind of supplement that sort of external resource with our own. So there's a lot of different sort of factors at this point in time. So we obviously sort of put the 30 million in mind that if it was really, really successful, giving ourselves plenty of headroom. But at the moment, we don't have an expectation. We'll probably, by the time we get sort of the other side of Christmas, we'll have a better idea of where we're going to look at that. But it may, to be honest, it may be sort of towards sort of February, March time.
Thank you. Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to know I fully support this approach. I think it's very much needed. Since becoming a councillor 6 months ago and actually having visibility of some of the figures and some of the statistics that we are asked to scrutinise, I'm absolutely staggered at some of the waste that's going on. I recognise, and I will say this, I recognise that the previous administrations have done a hell of a lot of work to save money, and I'm not belittling that. But there are some things that I think we need to look at afresh. I've often been criticised in these scrutiny commissions for bringing my outside knowledge of business in here, but I think that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons I wanted to come into the council, was to add some of my experience and hopefully help. So I've worked with Declan on some of the procurement issues, and I think that's helped in saving money. I've commented on the absence rates that are within the council, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And there are multiple areas that I think somebody coming in, fresh pair of eyes, business sense, will actually highlight a number of things that we can really work on. And we are talking big numbers. If you take, for example, the absence rate, if we look at today, there are actually 500 people off sick today. Now that, for me, is something that we need to address, and the cost of that, having to manage that actually we have to cover that, etc., etc. There must be something there. Now, I don't have the answers, but I'm hoping that the people that we bring in will be able to analyse how we address that and how we look at these opportunities. And I think the other thing is, everybody around this table has experiences, different experiences, and really, if we bring in everybody's experiences and work with Newton, that will add to the process. So I guess it's a plea to everybody in the room is, okay, we've signed the document, we're paying the money, let's make it work, because that's what we're all here for, is to make this work. I recognise that there are lots of questions. Mr. King, you're right. We need to scrutinise, but let's be positive about it rather than negative. Let's not look back. Let's look forward.
Just a point of order, Chair. Is it 500 people currently off sick? Because that seems incredibly high, and also could demotivate staff further if that is spread more widely. I'm not doubting your figures, but I just want to double check because I think there's a dangerous sort of undertone behind that.
I think there's been a mix-up between sort of days per FTE per year and the percentages. So that sounds roughly kind of 10%, where it's more in line with sort of 10 days per FTE, so it's kind of a little bit less than sort of half of that. So don't get me wrong, there's still a significant number of staff and it should still be a kind of key focus, but I think there's just been a confusion between FTE days and percent, but we can check that with Mr. Innes after the meeting.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'll take your point. We need to be careful of what information we share. This is a webcast meeting and staff can see it as well as our residents. So yeah, we need to be careful of what we're doing. And a lot of those people will be on long-term sick that are battling cancer and those long-term conditions as well. So they're not just people having an odd day off because they feel like it. So we just need to be careful about what message we get in there. So thank you for raising that point. Is there any other questions from members at the moment? Just a couple of points from me. Obviously we're holding vacancies where we can to keep costs down. Is that still ongoing? We've still got those financial controls in place?
So the financial controls are still there. On the vacancy side of things, it's chief officer review is the main kind of approach we take on that. So we try not to hold vacancies because it's either you need it or you don't in some ways. Sometimes you do hold them to sort of test it out, but it is mainly that kind of additional management oversight and review that we try and focus. That is happening. You can see it in a smattering in sort of the budget monitoring report of areas where there is vacancies, and where possible, again, we try and convert those into ongoing savings.
And I did pick up in there that our debt now is the lowest it's been for 20 years. So I think we need to put that record on previous administrations that have worked really hard to make sure that debt, and we've not borrowed any fresh money for absolutely years now. So I think we need to put a record about how that's coming down. Is there plans to obviously reduce that even more, or do you think we're sort of hit our bottom line now and it's just going to be the repayment over the 20, 30 years?
It's one of those we try and keep a bit of an eye on because it's obviously sort of relative between sort of the cost of repaying the debt and the interest income that we earn, but also kind of we always have to bear in mind the sort of the draws on the cash. And obviously you've heard today about the sort of the SCND deficit. So we'll be a little bit more comfortable when there's a resolution of that, because if that, although it hasn't had a big impact on our cash buffers at the moment, if that keeps going up, it will start to be a concern. So we'll keep looking at opportunities. They're becoming a little bit more scarcer, but it's not to say that none arise, because the long-term gilt rates, which define an awful lot of kind of the cost of repaying debt, they've stayed much higher for longer than we were expecting. So it may present more opportunities.
But we're probably in a good position compared to other local authorities with the debt that we've got.
Yeah, we've done well over the last kind of decade of not increasing the sort of that external debt where other people did, and it's one of the ways we've been able to square the circle of being low funded, that you can have some of those overheads of the organisation just try and keep really tight. So yeah, and the fact that we've been able to bring it down, some other authorities have started doing that as well, but relatively we're in a pretty good shape.
And I just need to pick on the send transport as well. There's obviously a real concern that's sort of with the EHCPs, it doesn't correlate with the cost that we're spending on send transport. So is there a bit of some work going around there about how that could explode at some point, we think?
I think the issue at the moment is around sufficiency. So although there is a huge increase in EHCPs, not all of the children that have then got an EHCP have got necessarily the placement that they need, and therefore don't require the transport. But I guess as further work kind of develops around sufficiency, I think there is a risk that there'll be further demand on the send transport. But it is definitely something that we are monitoring this year, but also looking very carefully at in terms of the growth in the MTFS in future years as well.
That could be another big hit for us as well then.
I think so. I mean, there's also a bit of work we're doing around, Simone's quite right, on the sufficiency side. So if a child can attend their local school, whether it's mainstream or special, we will fund transport if it meets the statutory requirements. But if a parent wants to go to another school, which is further away, we would not fund transport in those cases because we've made an alternative offer at a local place. So we're making sure we're reviewing all those cases and with real rigour, actually, because we need to make sure that we are protecting the transport budget as far as possible.
So if we recommend a school and the parents want the child to go somewhere else, we wouldn't supply the transport to that parental school. Okay, thank you. Is there any other, Mr. King?
Yeah, Chairman, a couple of things. First of all, I didn't get my point about send answered earlier. And the second thing is, just picking up Mr. Inn's point about employees and HR generally. Where does that get reported to? Because I can't recall that, and I don't recall seeing any detailed information about that side of things for quite some time. So I'm just wondering whether we can have some further information about that. for all of us, not just Mr. Innes.
It does
Thank
get
you.
reported. Is it employment committee? Yeah, employment committee. Goes to there. I'm sorry. Point someone else wants to speak. Yeah, no more questions. So we're happy to note this. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move back now to item 8, which are our annual delivery report and performance compendium. So Andy Brown, the Business Intelligence Team Leader, will introduce the report, supported by Richard Wilding, the Business Intelligence Team Leader. So we'll just switch over of. Andy, I think you're starting us off, are you? Okay, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few words in introduction. I'm conscious of a few new members on the committee from last year when we present this on an annual basis. So the report before you today presents the draft annual delivery report and performance compendium for 2025, which sets out the council's progress and performance over the last year. And the views of the Commission are very much sought on this before it goes to Cabinet next week and then on to the full council meeting on the 3rd of December. The document itself, it is in 2 parts. There's a narrative section which looks at delivery on the council's key priorities and objectives. It does cover September 24 to September 25, so it's as current as we could make it. And it looks at the various themes and priorities and service areas, both commenting on delivery and some of the performance priorities that we've got through sort of inspection improvement plans. And then the compendium itself, the more detailed document, has all our performance data, and it looks at core spending power, which is the kind of league table of funding for local authorities. And you'll see very much that Leicestershire is still at the bottom of that league table for fair funding, particularly for we're the lowest funded county. And you'll see significant differentials in that as well, both with the London authorities, so significantly more money per head in the London authorities, but also with similar sized counties with similar demographics. There's a big differential within that chart in the document. So part 2 goes into the detail of the data. Richard Wilding's just got a few slides just to pull out some of the highlights around how we benchmark as an authority against other counties, just some of the areas that have seen some improvement and some of the areas that have gone down in 24-25. We've set out separately some of the risks in the document as well. In terms of the narrative section, just to mention, we are required to produce this report under the relevant guidance for sector-led improvement in local authorities, and we do need to make it sort of publicly available and transparent with all of our data and have it scrutinised. And the National Audit Office, we've quoted in paragraph 5, set out some guidance that we're expected to follow. So that does say that we're expected to disclose our in-year performance, any performance issues we've got, as well as any risks. So we intended to meet that requirement in paragraph 5. The narrative section, I wasn't going to go through the narrative in particular. There's lots of good practice in there. You'll see right across all of the services some really good examples of delivery, children, families, communities, some good work in environment around biodiversity, and trees, more of a focus on flooding, public health, some of the public health interventions. Adult social care, we've set out the details of the adult social care inspection and the improvement plan that's coming forward around adult social care, which is one of the improvement areas. And you've mentioned a lot about special educational needs, and there's a lot of focus been going into that area. And we have actually seen some reasonable improvements in some of those metrics already through some of that work. So I wasn't going to go through the narrative section in particular, but I'm happy to pick up questions, perhaps after Richard's taking you through some of the data.
Thanks, Andy. So I've got a number of sort of slides which summarise really the performance compendium, which is part of the agenda pack. This first one is taken from page 56 of the pack. It summarises spending and performance for the 31 counties and county unitaries that we typically use as a sort of comparator group to judge how we're doing. It's based on 2023-24 data, which is the last year for which we've got a sort of full set of published data for all authorities.
Just by way of context, the slide shows net spend per head across the horizontal axis and performance on the vertical axis. The top right quadrant shows low spend and high performance. Leicestershire County Council during this latest year was ranked 5th for overall performance. We were 1 place higher than the previous year. I think Surrey dropped below us, they were above us previously. Historically, we've been the lowest spender per head of all of those counties. So you'll see that we're on the far right-hand side. So we're the lowest spending of those 31 counties. The next slide, it takes a similar approach and it summarises the relative performance positions for the various delivery themes. In the pack from pages 57 to 65, you've got individual views which show the sort of relative positions on spend and performance for each of these themes. But we've brought them together into one place just for ease of reference. They're colour-coded by department. Again, the top right-hand quadrant is high performing and low spending. And you'll see that the large majority of council services are clustered up there. And we're lowest, or we're in the lowest sort of half of spenders for all services. You'll probably spot there's a bit of a contrast between the adult social care ranks there in blue for service delivery. So that's about sort of efficiency, delivery of services to service users. And in that bottom right quadrant, you'll see the ranking that we've got for adult social care perception. And that's made up of indicators from the adult social care user survey and the carers survey. We're ranked 27th for that. We have improved slightly that ranking compared to the previous year with the latest survey results. It's fair to say quite a lot of those survey results for individual questions are relatively closely placed together, but that's not taking away from the fact that we do place quite a lot lower on perception than we do for service delivery. So moving on to the next slide, got a couple of slides that pull out lower relative performing areas. So this is the detail behind the benchmarking slides that you've just seen. These are set out in the agenda pack in the covering report and pages 9 to 10 of the pack. So I wasn't going to go through these in fine detail. There are a few relating to adult social care, particularly a couple in there covering perceptions. Also got a few in there relating to children and families too. Second slide, some other relatively lower performing areas compared to other local authorities. Got a few for public health in here. Landfilling of waste, we've been a relatively low performer for a number of years on that. But we have seen very significant improvements with some new waste contracts over the last 2 or 3 years. There are a few areas where we've significantly improved in relative and actual terms. These are set out from page 55 of the agenda pack. There's a couple of adult social care perception measures on there under adult social care where we've improved by 6 or 7 percentage points. So a decent improvement in perceptions there. We've seen a reduction in young people sentenced to custody. That's down under 3% now. In the SEND area, which I know has been touched on or discussed at some length, we've seen a good improvement here around attainment of young people with education, health and care plans, and also the appeal rate against our SEND decisions. So some improvements in practical terms there. I've got here a summary, and this is moving on to the dashboards that occupy 20 or so pages towards the back of the performance compendium. And this summarises the direction of travel of indicators in the compendium. This is page 71 onwards. So whether we've improved or otherwise compared to the previous result. This also shows how these figures have stacked up over the past 4 years. The darkest colour is the most recent year. So you'll see over to the left there that 46% of indicators were improving at the most recent point. It's perhaps worth just picking up. Last year, we saw 53% of indicators were improving. I think last year it's fair to say we got quite a bit of a bounce back there following the pandemic, particularly quite a number of the economic indicators sort of improved, and those results came through last year. So we had a larger than normal sort of percentage of indicators that were improving. It's dropped back to more of a normal position now. And moving on to pull out a little bit of detail around the areas that are improving over the past year. So these are the improving areas from the compendium. To pull out a few areas here, transport, 5 indicators improving here, bus use and satisfaction noteworthy there, as well as satisfaction with traffic and congestion. On the environment, 10 indicators have improved there. I've mentioned waste indicators already, a couple in there that are noted. Tree planting has been an area of growth and improvement too. Children's health, best start in life, 4 indicators in there. Adult health, 10 indicators improving. There are a lot of indicators that cover public health. So we've seen improvements around mortality from several main causes of death, obesity and air pollution. And lastly, at the bottom of the screen, adult social care and better care fund, some improvements around admissions to working age adults, people remaining at home following hospital discharge, people with learning disabilities that are living at home. And second page, some further areas that have improved over the past year. So the communities theme, we've seen strong performance over the past year here, particularly around the library service, visits to heritage sites, tourism visitors to the county. Children's social care, a number of improvements. We've got a good achievement against the government supporting families payment by results scheme. Some other improvements around child protection plans, care leavers and the timeliness of adoption. Community safety, we've seen a couple of measures there improve around first time entrance into the youth justice system and use of custody, which I mentioned a moment ago. Also some improvements around domestic abuse. Final section on here, economy and planning. Again, there's quite a lot of indicators here around the local economy. Some of these assisted by sort of improvements following COVID, others slightly by the impact of inflation, which has sort of had the effect of making the economy and wages and household incomes improve. There are some areas which are doing less well over the past year. So set out some of them here. These are all in the dashboards. So a number under adult social care, such as permanent admissions of older people to residential care. Overall satisfaction with care down slightly despite some other improvements from the adult social care user survey. Adult health, a number of indicators going down here, including healthy life expectancy. I think progress there stalled slightly in the 2010s, and I think the impact of COVID and long COVID is sort of noteworthy there as well. Children's social care, a slight drop in timeliness of assessments. We've also had more referrals for criminal exploitation and child sexual exploitation, which is something that we keep track of and obviously a concern. The send area at the bottom, we've seen a slight drop in last year's results for the number of EHCPs issued in 20 weeks. I'm told that the figures for the current year have improved, and we are tracking at a better level than we were at the end of last year. So that's obviously an area where a lot of resource has gone into improvement planning. Final screen here of areas where we're doing slightly less well over the last year. A couple of items around community safety, repeat cases of domestic abuse, not doing quite so well as the previous year. There are some corporate internal indicators around compliments, timeliness of response to complaints, which are down slightly. On the economy side, we've seen an increase in children eligible for free school meals in primary and secondary, so we're treating that as a sort of lower performing area. Also seen lower performance on economy, the employment rate and economic activity rates, which are another area which are sort of mentioned nationally quite often. The last section on this slide, transport, we've seen a slight reduction around park and ride journeys, vehicle speeds and road casualties. We've seen a sort of lower performance there than the previous year, although we do still rank among the better authorities in terms of road safety performance. And I'll hand over to Andy just for the final screen to pick out some of the sort of combined improvement areas from the report.
Yes, just to conclude, we do a lot of work with service departments and service heads. So this analysis feeds in more granular level to service delivery plans. So there's a range of improvement plans that sit beneath this. The corporate management team has a sort of a high level plan in terms of the main areas of focus. And then departments have got their own improvement plans and service plans. So all this analysis does get picked up at individual metric level as well as big picture level. Paragraph 16, we've set out some of the big picture areas of continued focus, which some of it you've been touching on your meeting today in terms of the financial challenges, the efficiency review, and this data will feed into the efficiency review as well. So the consultants will be aware of performance levels, where we're doing well, where we're doing not so well. So they can take that into account in their considerations. Local government reorganisation, obviously a big part of the picture moving forwards in terms of the future direction of the authority in area and how services may be configured. So that's clearly an important consideration in improvement. And then areas like SEND, we've talked about the public health strategy, a range of areas public health related that have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. So it's in the metrics, there's still to come sort of back through. So there are some improvement plans through that. And then the adult social care inspection, that picks up a number of issues highlighted in the report, that improvement planning work's going on, and then the LTP as well. So that sort of draws the strands together. I hope that's a helpful summary. Happy to take any questions from the Commission.
Thank you so much. And I always welcome this report every year. I think it's a really good overview of the work of the council. It's good to see we're maintaining our efficiency position, even though we're really low funded, we're still performing extremely well. So that's really good to see. Just a couple of points for me. I guess this will be published on the website once it's gone through. Is it just going to cabinet now, isn't it? Or does it come to full council?
Full council,
yeah,
yes.
Once that's improved, then it'll be on the website.
Yeah.
And I did mention earlier, obviously before you're here, when we're looking at the local government organisation business case, that there's a huge raft of data in here about how well we're performing and how good our services are. And I've asked Declan to look at including some of that within our business case there. So he might be coming to you for some data as well. But no, thank you for that and really good report. Any questions? James.
Thank you, and thank you again for the report. As the chair said, it's always interesting reading sort of overview of what we do as an authority. Again, I mean, you always seem to be amongst the most efficient authorities in the country because, frankly, we have to be as the lowest funded county. We honestly would have gone to the wall years ago if we weren't as efficient as we are. So credit to all involved in doing that and remaining efficient and ever striving for more efficiencies. And I think some of the comments you in the room for it, but when the leader spoke in the last item about always wanting to be more efficient and absolutely, so were we. And I'm sure anyone that would be in charge of this from whatever party or whatever colour they wear would always want that to be more efficient, to get more value for money whilst maintaining the services for residents. And this report shows, as previous years' reports have showed, that Leicestershire's doing that incredibly well. So that's great that we're able to do that. Disappointing that we have to do that. And obviously, if the efficiency review can make that even more efficient, then let's see what happens with that. But that's something that we're always going to have to strive for as an authority. Quite a specific question on the park and ride, which we put as a negative because the journeys are fewer journeys, so we're seeing that as a negative. Is that more of if it is a negative, is that more of a negative for the city than us? Because obviously the park and ride is physically located in the county, but people get park and ride to the city. That's sort of where they're going with it. And I do wonder whether part of the reason for that is because it's, speaking personally, I've never found it particularly difficult or expensive to park in Leicester City compared to say somewhere like Nottingham, where if you park in Nottingham all day. You have to remortgage your house. It's horrendous, right? You know, so there I get why a park and ride saves you loads of money and then use it there. In Leicester, it's just not that difficult or expensive to park. And I wonder whether that is a factor in terms of park and ride use. But as I say, in general, I do wonder whether that is more of a city thing than a county thing.
I think perhaps just to mention about Park and Ride, just have a quick look at the report. The journeys, number of journeys, they were 2% down from the previous year, so it wasn't a massive drop off. And I'm told in terms of the sort of long term trend position, we're not doing badly. But I think obviously the price of parking, people weigh that up, don't they, when they're driving in, so that people balance that up and take their own decision. So
I guess there are lots of other buses as well that you can get into. Yeah, you don't need to use the park and ride, but we are still jointly subsidising that, I take it, with the city, as far as I know. So we are paying for that service. So that's maybe something for a future discussion. Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to see there that the social care perception was a little disappointing, and yet you do the social care inspection. Did the inspection bring up any reason why the perception was down, or is the perception valid? You know, was it a true sort of report on what was happening?
Yes, the perception figures are taken for an annual survey that we do of social care users. And it's been the case for a number of years where we've come out just marginally below other authorities. So it's not a huge amount, but it is a consistent sort of reading. So there's obviously something in there. Unfortunately, the survey doesn't allow you to prescribe extra questions to get behind some of that. So we're not allowed to add kind of boxes for people to write comments on. So it's always been quite hard to get exactly into the detail of that. But you're quite right, the inspection, I think, does touch on some of the areas, particularly around information provision and people being able to navigate between health and social care, particularly, as well as some of the carers support issues and potentially some of the access to services where I think people find it hard to access services because of the just how they're now constructed. Is all part of that in terms of entitlement. So I think all of those things are in the mix as to why that's happening, as well as maybe people having high expectations of what they should be achieving from adult social care, which is absolutely understandable. So I think there's quite a range of reasons in that, and the inspection improvement plan will hopefully help us on that.
Any other questions from Mrs. Page?
Thank you. Thank you. As you know, every year I'm really a big fan of these reports. So no negative comments, and I can only echo the support. But I have just noticed, and I've gone through it again, so unless I missed it, do we have any stats over the performance of our Machu Multi Travellers Agent Unit and some of the stats of our education of travellers' children? Because, you know, I was recently questioned over that because I have got quite a few travellers in my provision, and I was wondering, do we reflect it somewhere? And I haven't been able to find that, and if so, you know, can we? Thank you.
Yes, there's certainly nothing in this high level report that covers that at the moment. I'm sure in the service level reports that we do, there'll be more detail around that. So we'll take that away, look into that, and whatever we can provide, we'll come back to you on.
Any other comments or questions from members? No. Okay, so the Commission's asked to note, and we've put our comments onto the annual report, and that will be presented to the full council in December. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you for that report. As again, always a really useful report for us. Okay, we'll move on to item now, which is our annual traded service strategy update and performance review. So Richard Hunt, head of catering, hospitality and says country here, but it should be county park, shouldn't it? We'll be introducing this item, and he's joined by the Assistant Director, Jane Glasgow. Obviously the lead member, Mr. Fowler, is still not with us, so we don't have a lead member here to scrutinise. So over to you, Richard, to start.
Thank you very much, Chair.
This is the annual review of the traded services strategy, which was approved by the Cabinet in 2023. And it sets out the performance of several of the services that the Council trades with external organisations for the year 2024 to 2025. The Council trades services such as school catering, cleaning, security, human resources, health and safety, professional and financial support, catering and hospitality, with a wide variety of customers and the general public. However, it's worth noting that the majority of the customers are schools and academies. Now, because this report is being presented midway through the 2025-26 financial year, as well as looking back to last year's results, we are also taking the opportunity to update the Commission on performance to date this year as well. So overall, in 2024 to 25, the performance of Leicestershire Traded Services was significantly improved from the previous financial year, and the budget was surpassed by £250,000. This was mainly due to a £1.5 million improvement in school food due to the transformation programme, and credits due to the team in LTS School Food who played a part in the turnaround here. School Food acquired a number of contracts in Leicester City after the closure of City Catering, but also lost a number of contracts as multi-academy trusts retendered their catering provision. This financial year, it is forecast that School Food will return to delivering a contribution to the local authority of £41,000, albeit slightly less than the budgeted position of a contribution of £298,000. However, to return to generating a surplus after so many years of losses is still very gratifying. Following feedback from the Scrutiny Commission at their meeting in March 2025, the Cabinet considered a report on the future of the school food service and agreed to close the service from the end of the current academic year. And this was in recognition that despite our improved financial position, the world of school food is changing rapidly, with retendering of services by academy trusts and the desire from schools for an overall cheaper service, which LTS cannot provide. All schools and staff were notified in September, and we are supporting those schools who have requested it to assist them in finding a new caterer for the start of the academic year. I'm going to skip over the section on Bow Manor briefly, and I'll pick that up at the end when we cover the engagement around Bow Manor, if that's okay. And if we move on to look at the performance of our cafes, there's been a really solid performance of our cafes, and cafes slightly improved on their budgeted position for the year. This financial year, one of the main changes has been the outsourcing of the cafe at Beacon Hill, which was something that the Scrutiny Commission had been very interested in the past, and a new operator took on the operation of Beacon Hill from August of this year. And we are still working to outsource the operation of the cafe at Tithe Barn as well, which will take place shortly. To move to look at professional services and property, all of these services hit or outperformed their budgets for 2024 to 2025. It's worth noting these services do continue to have challenges around the retendering and insourcing of services by multi-academy trusts, alongside wage inflation coming through, putting pressure on our margin. The numbers are looking more challenging in 2025 to 2026, driven by those pressures on the margin and lower customer numbers. And then to move on to the Century Theatre. The Century Theatre in Colville had a very successful year from a programming point of view, although the budget fell short of the target. There's a new management team in place at the Century Theatre for this financial year, with a renewed focus on community theatre with an improved financial forecast. And then to skip back to Bow Manor, which I skipped as I promised I'd go back to it. From point 30, we can see that the cost of the service at Bow Manor is just shy of £500,000, once all the additional property and central costs are considered. In the previous financial year, turnover on the hall side of Bow Manor was considerably up on the previous financial year, although not as much as budgeted. Outdoor education missed its income target, suggesting a continued softening of the market in this area. In the current financial year, Bow Manor was heavily impacted by closure due to the repairs necessitated by the dangerous chimneys. The site was rapidly closed down and all staff and ceremonies moved outdoors whilst emergency work was carried out to make the building safe. And I think credit is due to all of the teams who managed to achieve that with relatively little impact on the services being delivered there. Following the Cabinet's resolution in July 2025, we've started engagement over the future direction of Bow Manor. And there's been a public engagement exercise taking place with an online questionnaire, of which 888 members of the public have completed the questionnaire, which is an extraordinary level of engagement. We've also held 2 in-person engagement sessions and a great many meetings with interested parties and people who've come to us as part of the engagement process. There's also a school engagement process which is underway at the moment to understand more about future use of schools of the Bow Manor site. Some of the emerging themes from this engagement are set out in point 64 of the paper. And in point 65, we set out some of the key questions that we asked of the public around the strengths of Bow Manor, any barriers to making it a future success, and suggestions for how to generate more income. And the Commission might like to give its thoughts on those questions or anything else as part of the Bow Manor engagement process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to clarify first, so the school dinners, you said the Scrutiny Commission considered it in March 2025, but it was the new Cabinet from the new administration in July 2025 that made the decision to close it, wasn't it, in July this year?
So that's right. It was considered by the Commission in 2025, who made a recommendation, well, made a notice to the Cabinet, which then went to the Cabinet in July 2025. So yeah, it was a Cabinet decision in July 2025.
Any questions or comments from members? Mr. King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Richard. So I was at that meeting in March, and yeah, so it's incredibly difficult, but I still think that's the right decision. Irrespective of party politics, I think it's the right decision. But in terms of the letting out of the cafe locations, I think that is showing a positive outcome. Again, I personally don't think the county council should be running cafes and restaurants. I know others will disagree, but for me, that's not our core business. Our core business is adult social care, children and family services, fixing roads, not running cafes. So I think we should, it's not something we're terribly good at. We haven't been. So, because we've got high costs compared to smaller, medium-sized companies that can do these things. So that's my view. But so I think that's good. I think there's probably some issues around Bow Manor. I think we did express a view at the last scrutiny meeting back in March, which was, I think the recommendation was to dispose, but I know that didn't get taken forward. So that I know the administration is currently looking at that. But I think, again, that's a very difficult decision. There's obviously pros and cons to that. From residents in my area, the only people who use it are probably kids who go there on school outings and trips when they have an overnight stay or something like that. But as you've said, that's a very big market, and there's lots of other alternative places that I know local schools in my division go to. Most of them don't go to Bow Manor, I don't think. So I think that's problematic. If taxpayers are being asked to subsidise a facility that local residents in their locality don't use. So it is a very difficult, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. So I welcome the report. I just think there's a bit more work to do in terms of some of the other commercial services, whether we stay in them or whether we get out of those marketplaces, as we did discuss in great depth, I believe, in March. I think there is probably a case for getting out of some of those other commercial services as well, because it's a very competitive marketplace, and we can't be as competitive as some of the other businesses that are in that marketplace can be. Thank you, Chair.
Is there a question there? I didn't really.
It wasn't really a question.
No, okay, that's fine. I didn't pick one up. Mr. Mulaney.
Thank you, Chair. Leicestershire's school meal service, I think, was known for the quality of the nutritious meals that they produce. And you say here the food standards auditor, 65 out of 71 sites were given 5 stars, so it was certainly of a high caliber. I know that my view on this was the minority view, that I didn't agree with ending the school meal service. And I do see from the figures that we went from a net loss of 1.9 million in 23-24 to a net loss of 329 in 24-25 to net margin of plus 41,000 this year. So there has been a turnaround in that service. So it's I just expressed disappointment that it's obviously ending now.
I think I share your disappointment as well, knowing what I did when I was working the children and families, how important it was to get good food inside children during lunchtimes to enable them to function properly at school. So I'm also disappointed that the school catering service is closed as well. Mrs. Page.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. And I hate to say that, so I won't repeat it, but I echo everything Councillor King said. And we have been, and I've been here sitting over there, and we as an administration have been constantly going over this again and again. And I feel like a hamster on a little wheel going round and round. Now, as an administration and as a scrutiny commission, we have always advocated that the losses are detrimental and they need to be addressed. And it is unfair, for instance, residents in our areas to subsidise Bow Manor Hall when there is no benefit. I do agree that and obviously it is for this administration now to push back and to look at the savings that can be made. And the fact remains that in order to make even a small profit at Bow Manor Hall, trust me, we've been through all of the reports backwards and forwards, would cost absolutely millions, which in my humble opinion isn't sustainable. It's sad, but some hard decisions have to be made. Trading service, I do like the idea and everything that happened around school meals, but trading services also do need a still further investigation. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the continual loss, may it be small, of the Century Theatre. It keeps losing money head over tail, and something, for this administration to be picked up, because I think it is quite sad that even so it's been mentioned so many times over the years, we are still subsidising something that is continually losing quite a great deal of money. So just a comment, no questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't pick a question up there either. Mr. Poland.
Thank you very much. I suspect this is going to be another comment rather than a question, I'm afraid. But, as councillors, we spend a lot of time looking at spreadsheets and balancing out finances and does it make money, does it lose money, and all of that business. But occasionally, perhaps not as often as we should, but occasionally we come across questions where we have to balance financial value versus other value, cultural value, for want of a better description. And I think Bow Manor Hall and in fact Century Theatre come under that heading. So Bow Manor Hall is somewhere that I went to when I was a child. I have very fond memories of the place and the work that it's done for children for decades, generations is remarkable. And added to that, it does have a history that's maybe not as well known as it should be in regards to being an outpost of Bletchley Park during the Second World War, which is something that, as a history buff, I find fascinating, and I've sort of wondered whether we could have done more with the history side of things. So it has value, but the reality is we've talked at this meeting and at many other meetings about the sheer scale of the money that we have to find in our budget deficit. And in the context of predictions of £90 million deficit by 4 years from now, £500,000 a year it is difficult to justify, and I say that with regret actually, because I would rather we were able to keep it and have that for the future. But I do agree with the comments that it is difficult to justify in the context of diminishing attendances and alternatives in the market. Likewise with the Century Theatre, again, it's a wonderful resource in Northwest Leicestershire. I've been there once, I think myself. But the reality is, I remember from when I was lead member at Charnwood for leisure services, which included Loughborough Town Hall, which is the main theatre there. There's not a theatre in the country that outside maybe the West End that makes money. It has value. Culturally, it has value, but how do we balance that with the financial value in the context of being the worst funded authority in the country and all the other services that we provide? So I think reluctantly, I would agree with the comments that says we probably need to sell both assets, and you know, and with regret I say that. So that's really, as I say, it's not really a question in there. I just think that's it's something I've grappled with, and I know others in my area, which is actually not especially near Bow Manor. You know, it's something that the parish councils I've talked to, you know, have really thought about as well, because it is important. But it's that way, and we can't escape the sheer scale of the financial issues that we as an authority are facing.
Bloxham.
Chair. Yeah, I guess mine's more of a comment as well. I'll try and actually work a bit of a question into it. Just with respect to the Century Theatre, I mean, I've never heard of it. It's not in my area or anything. I do go to the theatre a lot. And I guess there's a debate to be had about whether the council should be owning theatres. But if we are going to own a theatre, I just wonder, I guess my question is, what sort of synergies does it have with everything else that we do? Could it do more, which might actually make it a bit of money as well? One of my kids took a GCSE English this year. I wanted to find Romeo and Juliet for us all to go and watch together. Couldn't find it anywhere. You know, not even in London, the RSC. It wasn't on that year. You know, maybe if we've got this theatre, maybe it's something that we, you know, every year it puts on plays that are on the national curriculum for GCSEs, and the schools can force thousands of kids to go and watch it, and you know, make some money that way. But yeah, it's just a thought that if we are going to own a theatre, it should be used more perhaps for, I've just had a look at the what's on, and it doesn't seem that it's really doing much to support the other things that we do.
The Century Theatre is located in the middle of Snibston Colliery Park in the centre of Colville, and it does do a lot with the park and is aiming to do an increasing amount with the local community, which I think exactly taps into some of those things that you've just set out there, that as well as being a theatre that's offering a mix of shows that the local community would want to attend in Northwest Leicestershire, it also seeks to bring in audiences, so things like there's a Christmas Carol on this Christmas, knowing that that's on the curriculum for schools. So the new management of the theatre is now starting to book in more of those things with a direct curriculum link, so that there is that opportunity for schools to come, and aiming to be a much more open theatre to the community. So there's more options for community productions to take place in the theatre and things like that. So that's absolutely centre to the new strategy for the theatre, so that it's a bit more outward looking.
Oh,
I know Christmas Carol's year 10, isn't it? But yeah, just that sounds good. I guess just more of that than to bring in kids from even further away.
I'm of the same view as well. Obviously, I've declared an interest in Bow Manor because it sits in my division, and I know how my local residents feel about Bow Manor. I know other people don't have the same, but obviously, in my heart, I don't want to see Bow Manor get rid of, and I've always stuck to that. But I think that is more with the Century Theatre. With Bow Manor, I think there is much more we can do, and if we can't do it in-house, then we should be putting it out to outsource it for more work to be done. And you know, otherwise we just end up being a social care provider, this council. I think there's more to us than just providing social care. You know, it's good for people to get them out to the theatre, to get them outside in Bow Manor, to get them to our cafes and our country parks. It's good for people's health, isn't it? And that prevents ill health and social isolation, and that stops our end result of people having social care. So I'm a big advocate for saving Bow Manor Hall. I'm a little bit disappointed that you know, all I've got from the public consultation on Bow Manor is 4 bullet points about what there was, yet there was 888 responses. So I would like a little bit more information about what people's view are of Bow Manor, you know, what more they would like to see done. It's a very small report, this, so I would welcome some more feedback of what those 888 people said. So if I can have that, I'd be really grateful for that. But, you know, I want to see Bow Manor saved, but I want it to see it making, at least washing its own face or making a small profit for this authority.
I mean, and the consultation feedback is, we're still working through that. There were 888 written responses. So this was a questionnaire where the kind of barrier to participation was reasonably high. People had to write boxes. You couldn't just sort of, you know, click yes and no and things like that. It's going to take us time to go through them. So we're in the early stages of working with College of Business Intelligence to do that. And then there will be more that we can share. But that's why I want to share those early themes, because most of what I have read in those responses, and I have read all 888, do fit broadly within those themes as set out in the paper. So that was an early indication of where we are.
Run it through AI, they'll be able to give you a summary. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a question of scale. Bow Manor, we're putting a lot of money into it. For people in my part of the world, as somebody said earlier, have never heard of it. Whereas Century Theatre, we're not subsidised by that much, and it has got a weird history, which is why we kept it. But ultimately, give the theatre to the community. I bet you'll find there's people willing to take it on and run it and use it as amateur dramatics. At least the building's there, and it then becomes community focused because it will take the community to make it work. That's how the theatre runs in the town where I live, and it has no money from the sort of state in any measurable way. And I think that might be an option for that. I think Bow Manor, sadly, will take so much investment to make it profitable. It, in our current climate, is unviable, I fear. But you know, I haven't seen all the figures. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments, Mr. King?
Yeah, so just following on from Dr. Hill's point, which I was just going to make. So Richard, coming back to the theatre, Century Theatre, which I missed out earlier. In terms of theatres that we support at the moment as a county council, do you know, do we support any other kind of theatre kind of outlets across Leicestershire or Leicester? Because I know we used to get, no, okay.
Easy answer for you.
So with that in mind, Chair, I do think that really it's what Dr. Hill said. Really, it's not core business of the county council to run and own a theatre. I really think, personally, it should be either let out to community theatre group, and there are many of those around the county. I've got some in my division that are very active and use buildings regularly, and we've got one in Market Harbour that has their own theatre, and they're able to apply for funding from groups that the county council, charities and funding bodies that the county council can't apply to. So therefore, and it's been very successful. So I think there is something in that I think maybe, you know, we shouldn't really be running it, and then a programme that is relevant to A, the local area, and B, the local needs of, you know, whether there's whatever the English curriculum or the theatre studies curriculum is for the year, can be then provided by that local provider. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Okay, so the Commissioner's asked to note the report and to add any questions there, but I think we've put a few notes down there, so thank you very much for that. So the date of the future meetings of the Scrutiny Commission during 2026 are listed on the agenda, and invites for those will be circulated shortly. As stated, I have no more urgent items, so thank everyone for attending today and declare the meeting closed. Thank you.